The night he stopped for us. She thought the rain would wash her blood away before anyone found her body. She was wrong. A stranger stopped in that alley. Not because he had to, but because he could. And that one choice rewrote everything. If you're watching this story, do me a favor. Stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far Lena's story has traveled, because what she survived that night, most people wouldn't believe it. But she lived it. And somewhere out there, someone watching right now needs to hear how it ends. The rain came down in sheets the night Lena Carter's life split in two, though she wouldn't know that yet. She'd know only that her feet hurt, that the left sole of her sneakers had finally given up somewhere around hour 7 of her shift, and that the $23 in tips folded inside her apron pocket wasn't going to cover the electric bill no matter how many times she did the math in her head. Millbrook, Ohio didn't have much going for it at 11:40 on a Tuesday night in November. The town had the kind of main street that used to mean something back when the paper mill ran 3 shifts, and now it meant a hardware store that opened on Saturdays, a laundromat where the dryers ate quarters, and Dot's Diner, where Lena had worked for the better part of 4 years, serving coffee to truckers and eggs to old men who came in alone because their wives had died and the house was too quiet to sit in. She pushed out through the back door into the alley, her shoulders hunched against the cold. The bag over her arm held a foil-wrapped grilled cheese that Dot had made her take, the way Dot always did on rain nights, pretending it was food that would have gone to waste. "You didn't have to," Lena had said, her voice raw from the day. "I know I didn't," Dot had told her, already turning back to the griddle. "Go home to that boy." That boy. Noah. 7 years old in January and hadn't spoken a word in 19 months. Lena adjusted the bag and started down the alley toward the lot, where her Corolla sat under the one streetlight that still worked. The asphalt was slick, reflecting a sickly orange glow back up at the sky, and she could hear the rain hitting the dumpster lid like someone drumming fingers on a countertop. Somewhere a few streets over, a siren climbed and faded. She was 4 steps from her car when she knew she wasn't alone. It wasn't a sound exactly. It was the quality of the air. The way the rain seemed to pause. The way her own breath suddenly felt too loud inside her skull. She'd felt it before. She knew this feeling the way a dog knows a thunderstorm an hour before it breaks. Lena. She didn't turn. Her hand had already found her keys. She'd learned years ago to thread them between her fingers without looking, the way her mother had taught her when she was 13 and walking home from the bus stop. "Lena, don't run." The voice came from behind the dumpster, smooth, easy, like a man calling his dog in from the yard. Her stomach dropped through the wet pavement. "Hey," he said, and stepped out. "Hey, it's just me." Derek Mallory stood 6'2" in wet work boots and a denim jacket gone black with rain. The overhead light caught the edge of his jaw, the faint shine of a chain around his neck, the eyes she'd once thought were kind. He was smiling the smile he always smiled right before he broke something. "How'd you find me?" she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice had gone flat, the way it used to go flat in the old apartment, when flat was the only thing that didn't get her hit. That's not a nice way to say hello. "How, Derek?" He shrugged, stepping closer. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead. "People talk. You think small towns are safer. They're not. You just know more of the people watching you. Stay back." "Where is he?" "Stay back, Derek. I'm warning you." "Where is he, Lena?" His voice dropped a register, that old slow slide she used to feel in her teeth. "Where's my sister's boy?" "He's not yours." "He's blood. He's her blood. And she's dead because of you." It came out of her before she could stop it, and she saw the change in his face. The way his jaw clenched, the way his smile went away like a shade yanked down. And she knew she'd said the one thing she'd promised herself she'd never say to him again. She moved. She didn't make it 4 feet before his hand closed on her upper arm and yanked her sideways, and the concrete came up fast. Her elbow hit first, then her hip, and the keys went skittering somewhere into the dark. She heard her own voice make a sound she didn't recognize. "Don't," she said. "Don't." "I've been clean a year, Lena." He was kneeling over her now, one knee pressed into her thigh, his face close enough she could smell the cigarettes under the rain. "A year. You hear me? I got my job back. I got my place. I got rights. You got nothing. He slapped her, open-handed, the way he used to do it when he wanted her to remember who he was without leaving a mark that'd show on a shift. Her ear rang. The inside of her cheek tore against her teeth and she tasted copper. I got rights, he said again, soft now. That boy is my nephew. My sister, God rest her. My sister wanted me to have him if anything ever. She hated you. He hit her again, harder this time. Her vision went white-gray at the edges and she felt her head knock against the pavement, a dull, wet sound like a pumpkin dropped on a porch. You've been hiding him, Derek said. 2 years you've been hiding him. You think I don't know you live in that sad little blue house on Birch? You think I don't know he goes to that elementary school with the yellow doors? No. No, 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 no. You come at my family, she said, and she could taste the blood now, could feel it slicking her lip. You come at him, Derek. I swear to God I will. You'll what? He laughed. It was a real laugh, amused, almost fond. You'll call the cops? You called them before. How'd that work out? She didn't answer, because he was right, and they both knew it. She'd called them 4 times in 2 years of living with him, and every time it had been the same. A sheriff's deputy who knew Derek from high school football, a handshake, a Derek, buddy, what's going on here, a warning, a good night. She'd stopped calling the 5th time, which was the time he'd broken her wrist. Here's what's going to happen, Derek said. He was still kneeling on her. She could feel the cold of the concrete seeping through her waitress pants into her skin. I'm going to come by the house tomorrow, maybe the day after, and you're going to hand me that kid. No? Yes, you are. I'll kill you first. No, you won't. He said it gently, almost tender. You're not that kind of woman, Lena. You're the kind that takes it. That's what I always loved about you. He stood up. She heard his boot scrape the wet asphalt. She curled her knees in toward her chest because her whole left side had gone numb, and she didn't trust herself to move. Hey, he said. She didn't look up. Hey, look at me. She looked. He crouched down again, put one finger under her chin, tilted her face up toward the streetlight so the rain fell straight into her eyes. He's all I got left of her, Derek said, and his voice cracked on it, a real crack, and for a second, for one stupid second, she almost felt something for him. Rachel's gone. My mama's gone. That boy is mine, Lena. And you took him. You took him from me. Rachel left him to me. Rachel was high. Rachel was running from you. He stared at her. The rain ran down his face. She watched his expression move through something. Grief, maybe? Or the performance of it. She couldn't tell anymore. And then settle back into that easy, awful smile. Tomorrow, he said. He stood. He walked away. She heard his truck door open somewhere at the mouth of the alley, heard the engine turn over, heard tires hiss against wet pavement, and then he was gone, and it was just her in the rain and the sound of her own breathing, which was coming too fast, too shallow, the way it always did after. She lay there. She didn't know for how long. When she finally sat up, her keys were in a puddle 3 feet away, and the grilled cheese had come out of the bag and was disintegrating in the water like a dead thing. She crawled toward the keys on her hands and knees because she didn't trust her legs yet. Her palms scraped on the asphalt. When she picked up the keys, her hand was shaking so hard the metal chimed against itself. She made it to the car. She got inside. She locked the doors. She sat behind the wheel with the engine off and the rain drumming on the roof, and she pressed both hands flat against her mouth and she screamed into them, a long, ugly sound she'd been holding in for longer than she could remember. Her breath fogged the windshield. Her ribs ached. Her ear was still ringing. When she was done, she wiped her face on her sleeve and turned the key and drove home. The blue house on Birch Street had a porch light that never stayed on through a storm. It was the kind of thing that had bothered her the first week she'd moved in, and now didn't bother her at all, which was maybe the saddest way a person could measure their own life. She sat in the driveway with the wipers off and the engine ticking as it cooled, and she looked at the house and thought, he knows where we live. Of course he knew. He'd always known. Derek Mallory had a way of knowing things. That was how he'd kept Rachel. That was how he'd kept Lena herself. For the 1.5 years she'd been stupid enough to let him in. He was not a genius, and he was not a mastermind. He was a small, mean, patient man, and small, mean, patient men were the hardest kind to get away from. because the world was built to let them win. She got out of the car. Her knee buckled once on the walk up to the porch, and she caught the railing and stood there for a second, breathing. The key turned in the lock. The house smelled like it always smelled. Old radiator heat, the lavender dryer sheets she bought at the dollar store, the faint burned toast ghost of the breakfast she'd made that morning. She eased the door closed behind her. She threw the deadbolt. She slid the chain. The television was on in the living room, the volume so low it was almost nothing. Some kids' show, animated fish swimming in loops through neon coral. Maddie, the neighbor girl from 2 houses down, was asleep on the couch with her phone still glowing on her chest. Lena didn't wake her right away. She stood in the doorway of the hall and listened, and from the back bedroom she heard the small, steady sound of a child breathing in sleep, and she closed her eyes and pressed her forehead against the doorframe. "Miss Carter?" She opened her eyes. Maddie was sitting up, rubbing her face. "Oh my God," Maddie said. "Oh my God, what happened to you?" "I fell." I fell, Maddie, coming out of work, the rain." Lena tried to smile. She wasn't sure what her face actually did. "How was he tonight? Did he eat?" Yeah, he ate the chicken nuggets. He did the puzzle with me, the dinosaur one, like 3 times. Maddie was on her feet now, pulling on her shoes, but her eyes kept going back to Lena's face. "Ms. Carter, your lip is bleeding, like a lot, I know. Do you want me to? I want you to go home, honey. It's late." "Okay." Maddie hesitated. "Are you sure you—" "I'm sure." Lena pressed 2 20s into her palm, twice what she could afford, and practically guided her to the door. She watched through the window until Maddie's porch light came on 2 houses down, and the girl was inside. Then she slid to the floor with her back against the door, and she cried, finally, for real, her fist jammed into her mouth so the sound wouldn't carry down the hall. She washed her face in the downstairs bathroom with the door shut. She didn't turn on the light. She did it by feel, the cold water stinging the split in her lip, her fingers finding the hot swollen place above her cheekbone where a bruise was already coming up. In the mirror, by the thin spill of hallway light, she looked like a woman she didn't recognize. She wasn't 30 yet. She'd be 30 in March. Her hair was the color of wet sand, pulled back in a ponytail that had half fallen out, and there was a streak of something. Blood, maybe just mud, along her jaw. Her eyes were her mother's eyes. She'd always hated that. Her mother had been beautiful and weak, and she had died in a trailer outside Akron of a heart that had simply given up at 41, and Lena had promised herself 1,000 times she would not be that woman. She turned the water off. She stood in the dark. She thought about Rachel. Rachel, 4 years younger. Rachel with the laugh. Rachel who'd called her from a gas station in West Virginia at 2 a.m, 2.5 years ago, and said, "Lena, I'm scared," and Lena had said, "Where are you? I'll come get you." And Rachel had said, "He's coming back. He went to get cigarettes. I gotta—" And the call had dropped. Rachel had been found 9 hours later in the bathroom of that same gas station. The official cause was overdose. The sheriff's report said accidental. Lena had never believed that. Not for 1 second. And Noah had been in the back seat of the car the whole time. He was 5 years old. He had waited in the dark for his mother for 9 hours. He had seen, through the gas station window, whatever he had seen. He had not spoken since. She stopped outside his bedroom door. She put her hand flat on it. Then she opened it, just a crack, just enough to see. He was curled on his side in the bed, the rocket ship bedspread up under his chin, his dark hair messy against the pillow. The nightlight, a little plastic moon, $3.99 at the Dollar Tree, cast a pale yellow half-glow across the ceiling. One of his feet was sticking out from under the covers. He always did that. It had driven Rachel crazy. Lena stood there and watched him breathe. She would not let Derek Mallory have him. She didn't care what it took. She didn't care what she had to do. She would put this child on a bus and disappear into the wind before she let that man within 100 feet of him. And under that thought, cold and low and absolutely certain, another one. He's going to come. And when he comes, the locks won't matter. She closed the door softly. She went to the kitchen. She opened the drawer under the coffee maker and took out the things she had taken out maybe 4 times in the 2 years since she'd bought it. A small black point .38 special, Rossi, second-hand from a pawn shop in Mansfield. She'd taken one class at the range in Worcester. She had never fired it outside that class. She checked that it was loaded. She put it on top of the fridge where Noah couldn't reach even on a chair. Then she sat at the kitchen table in her wet clothes, and she started to plan. She didn't sleep. She made coffee at 3. She sat at the table with a legal pad and she wrote down names. A woman she'd worked with in Columbus who'd gone through something similar. A domestic violence hotline she'd called once from a Walmart parking lot and never gone back to. A cousin in Michigan she hadn't spoken to in 4 years. Every name she wrote down, she crossed out. The Columbus woman had moved. The hotline would put her in a shelter, and shelters had addresses, and Derek had a way of finding addresses. The Michigan cousin would take one look at Noah's not talking and call child services, because the Michigan cousin was that kind of woman. By 6 a.m., the rain had stopped and there was a gray, bloodless light leaking through the kitchen curtains, and Lena was staring at a page of crossed-out names and a cold cup of coffee. Noah's feet padded into the kitchen. She hadn't heard him get up. She never heard him get up. He moved through the house like a small ghost, and she sometimes thought his silence had turned him into something you felt rather than heard. He was in his dinosaur pajamas. His hair stuck up in 3 directions. He stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, and he looked at her face for a long time, and Lena watched him take in the split lip, the swelling, the bruise that had surfaced under her eye, like something rising up from deep water. His bottom lip started to tremble. "Hey," she said. "Hey, baby. No, come here, come here." He came. He climbed into her lap the way he hadn't in months. He was getting too big for it, all sharp elbows and knees, and he pressed his face into her collarbone and he held on to her like she was going to drift off if he let go. He didn't make a sound. He never made a sound. But she felt his shoulders shaking, and she held the back of his head with one hand and rocked them both, very slowly, there at the kitchen table with the gray light coming in. "I'm okay," she whispered into his hair. "Hey, Noah, look at me." "I'm okay." He didn't look. "I fell," she said. "That's all." "Aunt Lena's a klutz, you know that. Remember when I dropped the pan of lasagna? Remember that?" She felt him nod, just barely, against her neck. "That's all this is, okay? That's all." She was lying to him. She knew it, and she suspected he knew it too. Noah was 7 years old, and he had seen things 7-year-olds were not supposed to see, and she had never once, in 2 years of raising him, been able to fool him about anything that mattered. But he let her lie. That was the arrangement. He let her lie because it was easier than the truth, and because some days a lie was the only thing that would let either of them eat breakfast. "I'm going to make you pancakes," she said, "with the chocolate chips, okay?" He nodded again. She made the pancakes. He ate 2. She ate none. She watched him chew, and she watched the light in the kitchen go from gray to pale blue, and she thought, "I have maybe 1 day, maybe 2, if I'm lucky. And then he's going to come." But she called out of work. Dot didn't ask questions. Dot never asked questions, which was one of the reasons Lena had stayed in that job. She drove Noah to school because she didn't know what else to do. She watched him walk through the yellow doors with his backpack bouncing against the small of his back, and she sat in the Corolla in the drop-off line and cried behind her sunglasses until the car behind her honked. She drove to the bank. She withdrew everything she had, $843. She drove to the sheriff's office on 3rd Street, and she sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, and then she drove away without going in, because she could already see it playing out. A report filed. A deputy dispatched to Derek's last known address. "Oh, we'll look into it, ma'am." And Derek warned, and Derek angry, and the lock still not mattering. She drove to the U-Haul place. She priced a van. She couldn't afford it. She drove home. She packed a suitcase. 1. Just clothes, a few photos. Noah's dinosaur, the one with the missing eye that he slept with. She sat on the edge of her bed with the suitcase zipped beside her, and she looked at the wedding photo of her parents on the dresser, and she realized she didn't have a plan. She had a suitcase and $800 and a child who didn't talk, and she didn't have a plan. And this was the part of the story where the woman in the movie had somewhere to go, and Lena Carter did not have somewhere to go. She called the hotline anyway. She got a voicemail. She hung up. By the time she picked Noah up from school at 3:15, she had decided they were going to drive. Just drive. West. Put Ohio behind them, stop somewhere she'd never been, and figure it out from a motel room. It was the worst plan she'd ever made. She knew it was the worst plan she'd ever made, but it was the only plan she had. Noah got in the back seat. She'd made him a peanut butter sandwich in a Ziploc. He ate half of it on the drive home. "Noah, baby," she said. She was watching him in the rearview mirror. "I need to tell you something, okay?" He looked up. "We're going to take a little trip tonight, just you and me. Somewhere far, and we might be gone for a while." Her throat closed up. "And I know that's scary, I know, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" He watched her in the mirror for a long moment. Then he nodded. Once. God, she loved him. So much it scared her. She didn't make it to the highway. She was on Route 20, maybe 6 miles outside of town, the sky going that purple-gray color it went before November dusk. She had the suitcase in the trunk. She had Noah in the back with his backpack and his dinosaur. She had the gun in the glove compartment because she hadn't been able to think of where else to put it. She had just passed the Hendersons' farm when she saw the truck in her rear view. She knew it before she recognized it. The shape of it. The shape of the man behind the wheel. A red Dodge with a dented front quarter panel. Derek. "Hold on," she said to Noah. Her voice was calm. Very calm. She didn't know where the calm had come from. "Baby, I need you to put your seatbelt on as tight as it goes. Can you do that for me?" She heard the click. Then she put her foot down. The Corolla was 10 years old and it coughed and the engine whined and she pushed it anyway, up over 60, past 65, the fields blurring past on either side. In the mirror, the red truck kept pace, then gained. She could see Derek's face now in the reflection. His mouth moving, maybe shouting something at her. His jaw set in that way it used to set before he broke things. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, come on, come on." She ran the stop sign at the intersection with County Road 11, and the Corolla's tires almost lost the road on the other side. She jerked the wheel straight. Noah made a small sound in the back, the first sound she'd heard out of him in months, a tiny frightened breath. "I know," she said. "I know, baby. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The truck was right behind her now, 6 feet, 5. She saw him come up on her bumper and she felt the first tap. A jolt, not hard, but deliberate. He was telling her to pull over. He was telling her this was cute, but it was over. Tap. Harder this time. "Hold on." The third hit took out her rear bumper. She heard it go, a tearing sound, and the Corolla fishtailed, and for one long second she was absolutely certain she was going to die on Route 20 with her sister's son in the back seat. And her last thought was going to be, I couldn't even get him past the county line. And then she saw the headlights. They came out of the dark ahead of her, high and steady, twin white points that didn't flicker. A vehicle coming the other way, moving fast on the wet road. Black. Some kind of SUV. Too nice for this stretch of highway. The wrong kind of car for Millbrook, for Route 20, for a Tuesday evening in November. She didn't know, in that instant, that she was looking at the thing that was going to change every remaining day of her life. She just knew that the SUV was not slowing down, and that Derek's truck bearing down on her from behind was not slowing down either. And somewhere in the space between those two sets of headlights, she and Noah were about to be caught. She gripped the wheel. The black SUV crossed the yellow line. It was coming straight at her. "No," she said. "No, no, no." At the last possible second, with maybe 30 yards between them, the SUV swung hard, not into her lane, not away, but across, cutting a perfect diagonal onto the shoulder and then back into the road behind her, blocking Derek's truck like a wall slammed shut. She heard the collision in her rear view, a heavy, dull crunch of metal giving up, the sound of a grill folding on itself, the brief animal scream of tires locking on wet asphalt. She didn't stop. She couldn't. Her foot was frozen on the gas and she was past the wreck before her brain had finished processing what her eyes had seen. A quarter mile up the road, her hand started shaking so badly she had to pull over. She eased the Corolla onto the shoulder. She put it in park. She looked in the rear view. Behind her, in the last light of the day, she could see the two vehicles, half off the road. The red truck's front end was accordioned against the side of the black SUV, and a man was getting out of the SUV. She could see his silhouette against the one working headlight, tall, unhurried, the shape of someone who did not seem to be in any particular pain. He was walking, not toward her car, but toward the driver's side of Derek's truck. In his right hand, she was almost sure he was carrying something. She couldn't see what. Not from this distance. Not in this light. But she knew, in a way she could not have explained to anyone, in a way she would not be able to explain to herself for a long time after, that whatever was about to happen to Derek Mallory on the shoulder of Route 20, it was not going to be something the Ashland County Sheriff's Department would ever find a record of. She reached back. She found Noah's knee with her hand. "It's okay," she told him, not knowing if it was true. "Baby, it's okay. It's okay." In the rear view, the tall man reached Derek's driver's side door, and Lena Carter, sitting on the shoulder of Route 20 with a bruise on her cheek and a suitcase in her trunk and a silent child in her back seat, did the thing she would second-guess for the rest of her life. She put the Corolla in drive, and she started rolling, slowly, only slowly, back toward the wreck. Because whoever that man was, whatever he was about to do, she had a feeling deep down in the place where her mother's voice had lived and died that he had just done it for her. And she needed to know why. The rain started again, fine and cold, as she rolled the last 100 yards toward the two tangled vehicles and the tall, still shape of the stranger standing in the road. The Corolla crept along the shoulder at maybe 5 miles an hour, the wipers slapping at the fine rain, and Lena's hands on the wheel were so tight her knuckles had gone the color of old paper. In the back seat, Noah had gone still in the way only Noah could go still. A stillness that wasn't fear exactly, but the kind of held breath a small animal learns in a world that keeps trying to eat it. "Stay down," she said. "Baby, I need you to lie down on the seat. Can you do that?" She heard the rustle of his jacket. He disappeared from the mirror. 20 yards ahead, the scene was taking on detail the way a Polaroid does. Slowly and in the wrong order. The black SUV was a Suburban, or something close to it, heavy and dark and sitting at an angle that had been chosen, she realized. Not the way a car comes to rest after a crash. The way a car comes to rest when a driver who knows what he's doing decides this is where it stops. The red Dodge had plowed its front end into the Suburban's right rear panel, and steam was rising up from under the crumpled hood in thin white ribbons that the rain was already killing. The tall man was at Derek's window. He wasn't in a hurry. That was the first thing she noticed. He moved the way some men move in hospitals and some men move in courthouses, like the clock belonged to him, not the other way around. He was in a dark coat, long, wet across the shoulders, and even through the Corolla's rain-smeared windshield, she could see that the coat fit him the way clothes fit people who had other people measure them. In his right hand was a gun, not held up, not pointed at anything, just held, the way a man holds a hammer he hasn't decided to use yet. She stopped the Corolla 40 feet back. She killed the headlights. She didn't roll down her window. She cracked the driver's door instead, just an inch, because the Corolla's window motor had been broken since August and she wanted to hear. "Step out of the truck," the voice carried in the wet air. Flat, not loud, not angry. "Both hands where I can see them." "Who the hell are you?" Derek's voice through the closed window was muffled, but she could hear the snarl of it. She knew that snarl. That was the snarl of a man whose plan had just become someone else's plan, and who did not yet understand that his situation had changed. "Get away from my truck, man. Get the hell. Step out. I got a gun in here, bud." "I know you do. It's under the seat. The safety's on. You haven't fired it in 3 years." A pause. "Step out, Mr. Mallory." There was a silence then that Lena could feel in her teeth. "How do you know my name?" "Open the door." Derek opened the door. He half fell out onto the wet asphalt more than he stepped, and Lena watched him straighten up slow, one hand going to his forehead where he must have hit something in the crash. There was blood on his face. Not a lot. A thin line from his hairline down over his eyebrow. His jacket was torn at the shoulder. The tall man took one step back. Just one. Polite, almost. "Turn around," the tall man said. "Hands on the hood." "I don't—" "Hands on the hood, Mr. Mallory, or I'm going to put them there for you, and we're both going to find that unpleasant." Derek turned. He put his hands on the hood of his truck. The steam rose up around his wrists. "Who sent you?" Derek's voice had gone different, thinner. Is this about Cleveland? Because I paid that, man. I paid that 2 months ago." "This isn't about Cleveland." "Then what? This is about the woman in the Toyota up the road." And the child in the back of it. Lena felt something in her chest do a small, hard thing, like a lock turning. Derek said nothing. She could see the shape of him against the hood, the working of his jaw. "I want you to listen to me very carefully," the tall man said. And now he took another step forward and put the barrel of the gun, not against the back of Derek's head, but against the meat of his neck, low, where the trapezius muscle ran up from the shoulder. "Because I don't like to repeat myself, and the next minute of your life is the only one that is going to be yours to decide about for a while." Derek swallowed. She saw it. "You're going to get back in that truck. You're going to let me call you a tow. And when the tow comes, you're going to tell the man driving it that you fell asleep and hit a deer. You will show him this truck. You will not show him the SUV. You will go to the hospital in Ashland, and you will have a doctor look at that cut, and you will tell the doctor the same thing you told the tow. Are you following me so far, Mr. Mallory?" "Yeah." It came out hoarse. "And then you're going to go home. And you are never—" and I want you to hear this word, because I'm going to use it one time, and only one time. "You are never going to go near that woman or that child again. Not at the diner, not at the house on Birch Street, not at the elementary school with the yellow doors. You are not going to drive past. You are not going to ask about them. You are not going to speak their names to another living person. Do you understand?" Do you understand, Mr. Mallory?" "Yes." Derek's voice cracked on it. "Say the words." "I understand." "Good." The tall man took the gun off Derek's neck. He did it gently, like setting down a cup. "Now, here's the other part, because I don't believe you. I said I know you said, but I've met men like you before, Mr. Mallory, and in 90 days of thinking about it, of talking yourself back into it, of deciding you were humiliated on a piece of road in the rain, in 90 days you are going to convince yourself that this never happened, and you are going to do something stupid, so I'm going to help you." He reached into his coat. From an inside pocket he took out a phone. Not his, Lena thought. The screen was dark. It was the kind of phone you bought at a gas station with cash. He held it up. "There is a file on this phone," the tall man said. "A photograph. It is a photograph of a man in a motel room in Mansfield, Ohio, 4 weeks ago, handing a pound of methamphetamine to a person that man believed to be a distributor from Cincinnati. The person from Cincinnati was not, in fact, from Cincinnati. The photograph is very clear. The light is good. The man's face, your face, Mr. Mallory, is unmistakable." Derek had gone very still. "This phone," the tall man continued, "is going to live in a safe deposit box in a town I'm not going to name. If I hear your name in the same sentence as Lena Carter or Noah Mallory, one time, even once, from anyone, Bob, a cousin, a bartender, a woman at the gas station, the photograph travels. First to the DEA, then to the county prosecutor, then to an acquaintance of mine in Lucasville who will be very interested to hear that you are coming. Do you understand what I am telling you? You can't. I'm not asking if I can. I'm asking if you understand." Silence. "Yes." "Say it." "I understand." "Thank you." The tall man put the phone back in his coat. He took out another phone, his own, she supposed, and dialed a number, and she heard him say a few quiet words about a vehicle on Route 20, 6 miles east of Millbrook. A tow, no sheriff, no insurance, and then he hung up. He did all of this without taking his eyes off the back of Derek's head. "A truck will be here in 11 minutes, he said. "You will wait for it. You will do what I told you." He turned. He walked toward the Corolla. He did not run. He did not hurry. He walked the way he had done everything else. Like the rain and the wrecked vehicles and the bleeding man with his hands on the hood were all small details in a larger evening he had already planned. Lena's hand went to the glove compartment before she knew it was moving. Her fingers closed on the grip of the .38. He stopped 6 feet from her door. He held both hands up. Empty now. The gun had vanished back into the coat somewhere. She hadn't seen him do it. "Miss Carter." His voice, up close, was lower than she'd expected. Not smooth. Roughened somewhere, maybe an old smoker, or maybe just a man who'd yelled too much in his 30s. "I'd like to speak with you. I'm going to come no closer than this. You can keep your hand on whatever you've got in that compartment. I imagine it's a revolver." She didn't answer. Her tongue wouldn't work. "May I know your first name?" You already know my name. I know your last name. I know your address. I know the name of the diner where you work and the name of the child in your back seat. I don't know what your mother called you when she was happy with you." It was such a strange thing to say that she almost laughed. The laugh came up out of her chest and got stuck somewhere near her throat and came out as a sound that wasn't a laugh at all. "Lena. Lena, thank you." He inclined his head, barely. "My name is Victor Hale. I understand if that doesn't mean anything to you. It's better if it doesn't. Who are you?" "I'm the man who was driving east on Route 20 40 minutes ago." "That's not an answer." "No, it isn't." He looked briefly at the sky. The rain was easing into that fine misty nothing it did at the tail end of a November storm. "Miss Carter, Lena, I'm going to ask you a question, and I would like you to think about it before you answer. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Where were you going tonight?" She opened her mouth. She closed it. "I don't know," she said. "I thought not." "How?" Her voice was thin. "How do you know my name? How do you know about Noah? How do you know any of that?" "That's a longer conversation than we have time for on the side of a highway." "Then we're not having any conversation, Mr. Hale." "Victor, we're not having any conversation, Mr. Hale." He took that. He didn't smile exactly, but something moved in the corner of his mouth. "Fair," he said. "Then I will give you what I can, quickly, and you will make a choice. And whichever way you choose, I will honor it. Is that acceptable?" She didn't answer. She was looking past him at Derek, whose hands were still on the hood of the truck, whose head was bowed like a man in a church he did not want to be in. "Acceptable?" Victor said again. "Yes. I run certain interests in the Midwest. Some of them are legal, some of them are not. 3 months ago, in the course of one of those interests, my people had reason to put surveillance on a man named Curtis Boyd, who I believe sold Derek Mallory a quantity of methamphetamine in a Mansfield motel 4 weeks ago. The surveillance was on Mr. Boyd. Mr. Mallory became a peripheral subject by accident. My people are thorough. When they take photographs, they run the faces. And when they run the faces, a name like Mallory comes back with a history attached." He paused. "A history that included a restraining order filed by a woman named Lena Carter in 2022 and quietly allowed to lapse in 2023. That's not..." Her throat closed. "That's not a history. That's..." "I know what it is, Miss Carter. I know what it is exactly." His voice did something then. Something she couldn't name, a shift, a kind of old weariness that came and went so fast she wasn't sure she'd heard it. "I've known what that is for a long time." She looked at him. Really looked, for the first time. In the weak glow from the Suburban's one working headlight, she could see the lines around his eyes. He was older than she'd thought at first, maybe late 40s, maybe a hard 50. His hair was dark and going gray at the temples. He had a face that had been handsome once, and now was something more useful than handsome. A face that did not tell you what it was thinking unless it had decided to. "So you what?" she said. "You cross-referenced." "I pulled a flag. Mr. Mallory's name has been entering and leaving certain conversations I monitor for the last several weeks. 48 hours ago, one of my people placed him at a truck stop outside Akron, asking about a blue house on Birch Street. I put a car on the town. When you drove out of Millbrook tonight, I was an hour away." "Why? Why what? Why were you an hour away? Why do you care? Why did you come?" He didn't answer at first. He looked past her, down the length of Route 20, at the truck stop lights a mile up the road blurring through the wet air. "I had a daughter," he said. "Once." He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. Something in Lena's chest did a small, sickening drop, the way it did when you suddenly understood a thing and did not want to have understood it. "Mr. Hale, I'm going to make you an offer, Miss Carter. I want you to hear it, and I want you to understand that you are under no obligation, and that if you say no, I will drive you back to your car. Or a different car, if you prefer. I have one 30 minutes away, and you will never see me again. And Mr. Mallory will not bother you again. That part is done. That part was done before we started talking. Do you understand?" "I don't know what I understand. The offer is this." He took a slow breath. She saw it fog in the air. "I have a property. It is on a lake. about 4 hours from here. It is not on any public map. It is staffed. It is secure. There are 2 women on my security team who would be available to stay in the house with you and the boy. You would have a bedroom. The boy would have a bedroom. There is a pediatrician I trust who would see Noah. Privately, no paperwork, no calls to anyone. You could stay there for as long as you needed to decide what you want the rest of your life to look like. And in exchange, nothing. That's not an answer. It is, actually, but I understand why you don't believe it. So let me say it differently. I don't want anything from you. I don't want your gratitude. I don't want your story. I don't want your body, and I don't want your silence, and I don't want your loyalty. I want you and the boy off the side of this highway and somewhere dry. After that, what you do is up to you. And if I say no, then I will be very disappointed, Victor said, but I will also drive away. She looked at him for a long time. Why me? She said. The question came out smaller than she'd meant. It sounded like a thing a child would ask. She hated the sound of it, but she couldn't take it back, and she couldn't look away from his face. Because, Victor said, a few years ago I made a different choice on a different night, and I have thought about that choice every day since. And tonight I saw a set of brake lights moving too fast down Route 20 with a truck on its tail, and I decided I was not going to make that choice again. Behind him, far down the road, she could see the headlights of the tow truck coming. Miss Carter, he said, the offer has a clock on it. Not because I'm pressuring you, because in about 6 minutes, a man in a cab is going to come around that bend, and the calculus of this situation changes when he does. So I need an answer. She turned her face toward the back seat. Noah had pulled himself up, just a little, just enough to see over the edge of the window. His hair was sticking up, and his eyes were enormous in the dark. He was looking at her, not at Victor, not at the wreck, at her. And he had that look he got sometimes when he was about to cry, but had forgotten how to make the sound. She reached back, found his hand. It was so small. It always surprised her how small it was. Noah, she whispered, is it okay? Is it okay if we go with this man, just for a little while? Noah looked past her, through the windshield, at Victor. He looked for a long time. Victor stood absolutely still and did not pretend not to be looked at. Noah nodded. Once. Small. Lena turned back. Okay, she said, and her voice didn't sound like her voice. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Victor nodded, and it was the quietest thing she'd ever heard a person say. The tow truck came. A tired man in a trucker cap got out, nodded at Victor like he'd seen him before, which Lena realized with a small cold slide in her stomach he probably had, and went to look at Derek's Dodge. Derek did not look up. Derek had not moved. Victor spoke a few low words to the tow driver, and the driver nodded again, and that was all. A second car came up out of the dark behind them, a black sedan, the same kind of too nice for this road car as the Suburban. A woman got out of the driver's side. She was maybe 35, hair pulled back, a dark jacket, a face that did not waste motion. She walked to the Corolla, and Lena felt her whole body tense. Miss Carter. The woman's voice was soft. My name is Marin. Mr. Hale has asked me to drive you and your nephew to the property. I'll be with you the whole way. Your car will be moved somewhere safe. Anything you want out of it. A suitcase, clothes, papers. I'll get it now, or you can get it yourself. Whichever feels better. Lena looked at her for a second. I'll get it myself. Yes, ma'am. Lena got out. Her knee, the one she'd fallen on last night, almost gave, and Marin, without making a thing of it, put a hand lightly under her elbow. Easy, Marin said. I'm fine. I know you are. Easy anyway. They moved the suitcase to the sedan. Lena took Noah's dinosaur and Noah's backpack herself, and then Noah himself, lifting him out of the Corolla's back seat because his legs had gone rubbery. He wound his arms around her neck, and he pressed his face into her shoulder, and she carried him the 10 feet to the sedan, and she buckled him into the back seat and tucked the dinosaur under his arm. He didn't let go of her hand until she had to pull it free. I'll sit with him, she said. Yes, ma'am. Victor was still standing beside the wreck. Derek had gotten back into the cab of his truck. The tow was hooking up the front end. Victor turned, caught Lena's eye across the distance, and lifted 2 fingers from his side. A nothing gesture, less than a wave. She got in the back seat. Marin drove. For the first 20 minutes, no one spoke. Noah fell asleep against Lena's side, his mouth slack, a small line of drool starting at the corner of his lip. Lena watched the road unspool through the windshield, black and wet and endless. County road she didn't know, then a state highway, then what she thought might have been a private road, although there was no sign. "Miss Carter," Marin said finally, "there's water in the side pocket of your door, and there's a sandwich in the cooler if the boy gets hungry when he wakes. Turkey." I didn't know what he liked. "Turkey's fine. Thank you." "Yes, ma'am." "You don't have to call me ma'am." "Okay." A silence. "Is this really happening?" Lena said. She wasn't sure she'd said it out loud until Marin glanced at her in the rear view. "Yes. Just yes. Yes." "That's not very comforting." "No," Marin agreed. "I don't imagine it is." Another silence. Lena watched the taillights of the Suburban ahead of them, Victor's Suburban, through the mist. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask." "Is he a good man?" Marin didn't answer right away. She drove the way a person drives who has driven a great many miles in difficult conditions. Light on the wheel, eyes always one turn ahead. "I've worked for Mr. Hale for 9 years, Marin said. "I've seen him do things I wouldn't tell my mother. I've also seen him do things I would." A pause. "I can't tell you if he's a good man, Miss Carter. I don't know what that word means anymore. I can tell you he's a careful one, and that what he said to you tonight, he meant. That much I know." "That's not very comforting either." "I know it isn't." "Where are we going?" "A place on a lake. You'll see it when we get there. He'll explain more when we get there." "What's the name of the lake?" "It doesn't have one, ma'am." "Everything has a name." "Not everything, but..." They drove another 2 hours. The rain stopped somewhere around the Indiana border. If they were in Indiana, Lena wasn't sure anymore. The road narrowed, then narrowed again. Then they turned off pavement entirely and were on gravel, and the gravel ran along a ridge, and then they came down the other side of it, and Lena, looking out the window, saw the water. It was a dark, shining sheet of nothing stretching off into trees. No houses on the opposite shore, no lights that she could see. A thin moon had come out behind the clouds, and it put a stripe across the water like a knife laid flat. The house came out of the dark gradually. It was not the mansion Lena had expected. It was a long, low thing of stone and dark wood, the kind of house built by an architect for a person who did not want to be seen, set into the hill above the water with a wide porch and big windows going orange with interior lamplight. 2 cars were parked in a graveled turnaround. A single man stood on the porch with his hands folded in front of him. He was not holding a weapon. Lena did not doubt that one was within 2 feet of him. Marin pulled the sedan up. She killed the engine. "Miss Carter." "Yeah." "We're here." Lena didn't move for a second. She sat in the back seat with her nephew asleep against her ribs, and she stared at the orange-lit windows of this house she had never seen before, in a part of the country she could not have put on a map. And she thought, very clearly, "This is the last moment of the life I knew." She would think about that moment a lot later. The way the dashboard clock had said 9:47, the way Noah's breath had been warm on her collarbone, the way she had not yet gotten out of the car. She got out of the car. Victor was already on the porch. He'd driven faster than Marin, apparently, or taken a different road. He'd taken off the long coat. Underneath, he was in a dark sweater and jeans and leather boots, and without the coat, he looked less like a man in a movie and more like a man in a house, which somehow made her heart pound harder. Marin came around and lifted Noah gently out of the back seat. Lena let her. Noah didn't wake. Marin carried him like a woman who had carried a child before, and something in Lena ached at the easiness of it. "Miss Carter," Victor said from the porch, "please come inside. There's a fire going. And there's food, if either of you can eat. And there are 2 rooms made up, one across the hall from the other, because I assumed you'd want him close." She climbed the porch steps. The wood was old and dark, and did not creak. She stopped in front of him. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "Don't." He said it gently. "Please. Not yet. You don't know what you're thanking me for. Are you going to hurt us?" It came out of her before she could stop it. She hated how it sounded, but she needed to hear him say it. Victor's face went still. "No," he said. "How do I know?" "You don't. Not tonight." He paused. "But tomorrow, when the sun comes up, the front door will not be locked from the outside. The keys to the sedan will be on the hook by the door. There's a road out. I'll have Marin point it out to you in the morning, if you want her to. And if at any time, tonight or next month or next year, you decide this isn't what you want, you will not be stopped. You have my word on that. For whatever a man's word is worth when you've known him for 3 hours." She stood on his porch, with her bruised face and her aching knee and the salt taste of half-dried tears still on her lip, and she looked at Victor Hale for a long moment. Then she nodded. Inside, the house was warm. There was a fire in a stone hearth at the far end of a long room, and the light from it moved on the wood floors the way firelight moves, alive, uneven, breathing. There was a smell of beef stew from somewhere, and fresh bread. A woman in her 60s came out of a doorway and introduced herself as Claire, and asked, in the practical voice of a woman who had run many houses, if Lena would like to eat, or wash, or sleep, or some order of the three. Lena couldn't answer. Claire nodded like she hadn't expected one, and turned back to the kitchen, and from the kitchen came the small domestic sounds of a kettle, a lid, a drawer. Marin came in carrying Noah, who had half woken and was looking around with huge sleepy eyes. Lena took him. She held him against her hip. He was too big to be held that way. She didn't care. "The room's at the top of the stairs," Marin said. "First door on the right. His is across. There's a light on." "Thank you." She carried Noah up the stairs. Each step hurt her knee. She didn't let go of him. At the top, she pushed open the first door on the right, and inside there was a bed made up with clean sheets and a lamp burning low, and a window that looked out over the dark water. And for one stupid second, she thought she was going to put Noah down in that bed and then curl up on the floor beside him the way she always did on the nights he had bad dreams. She thought about it. She put Noah down. She pulled the covers up to his chin. She kissed his forehead, and he made a small sound. Not a word, still not a word, and turned onto his side. She watched him for a full minute, the rise and fall of him. Then she crossed the hall. The other room had a bed and a lamp and a window and the same view. There was a pitcher of water on the nightstand. Someone had put a folded robe at the foot of the bed. She stood in the middle of the room in her wet waitress pants and her ruined shoes, and she felt the weight of every hour of the last 24 come down on her all at once. Downstairs, low in the house, she could hear Victor's voice. Just his voice. No words she could make out. He was talking to someone on a phone, probably. Or to Marin. It didn't matter. She stood there and she listened to him talk. A stranger's voice through the floorboards of a stranger's house, and she realized with a kind of slow terror that she was not afraid anymore. She did not know what she was instead, but it was not fear. Whatever else happened next, and she knew at the bottom of herself that this was not over, that a man like Victor Hale did not come with only the costs he had named. Whatever happened next, right now, on this night, in this room, Noah was asleep and dry and warm, and no one was going to put their hands on either of them before morning. She sat down on the edge of the bed. She lowered her face into her hands. She stayed that way for a long time, not crying, just breathing, feeling the shape of her own breath inside her chest, listening to the quiet old sounds of a strange house settling around a child who wasn't hers by blood, but had been hers anyway for 2 years and would be hers. She understood now for as long as she drew breath. Somewhere in the trees outside, a bird she didn't know the name of made a low, mournful sound over the water. She turned off the lamp. She lay down on top of the covers, fully dressed, with her shoes still on, and she listened through the wall to the steady, sleeping breath of her sister's son. She did not sleep. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she closed her eyes in the dark without her ears straining for the sound of a man's footsteps on a porch, and it felt like something. It felt like the very smallest edge of something she had forgotten existed. Outside, the wind moved on the water. A car started up somewhere far down the drive, went quiet again. In the room across the hall, Noah murmured in his sleep, a wordless little sound. Lena lay in the dark and listened to it, and counted his breaths until her own breathing finally slowed to match them, and somewhere between one breath and the next, the house held, and she was still. She woke to the sound of a spoon. That was the first thing she registered. The small, ordinary, absolutely unfamiliar sound of a metal spoon stirring inside a ceramic bowl, somewhere downstairs, somewhere under her. For a long, confused second, she thought she was back in the apartment she'd had in Columbus 10 years ago, when a boyfriend named Michael had made her oatmeal on Sunday mornings before everything in her life got bad. Then she opened her eyes and saw the wood beams above her and the unfamiliar angle of the window, and it came back to her all at once, a cold, clean wash of it. Route 20, the truck in the rear view, Victor Hale's voice saying, "Step out of the truck," and the weight of Noah asleep against her ribs in the back seat of a stranger's sedan. She sat up too fast. Her knee protested. She had slept in her clothes, still with her shoes on top of the comforter, and her neck felt like someone had taken a wrench to it during the night. The light in the room was pale and new, gray-pink at the edges. A very early morning, maybe 6:30, maybe 7. She could see the lake through the window, mist sitting on it in soft low rolls, the opposite shore blurred into a dark line of pines. A dock ran out into the water. A single loon somewhere was making that strange throat sound they make. She got up. Her whole body hurt in the particular way it hurt after a bad night. Ribs from the alley, knee from the asphalt, shoulder from some impact she couldn't even locate. Her face in the mirror over the dresser was a sight. The bruise above her cheekbone had spread, gone from red to a sullen purple blue, and the split lip had scabbed, and she looked, she thought, like a woman who had been beaten up, which was because she was. She crossed the hall. She opened Noah's door without breathing. He was still asleep, curled the way he always slept, one foot out from under the blanket, his dinosaur crushed under his arm. His mouth was open slightly. He looked like a normal child. He looked like any child anywhere. Lena stood in the doorway and let herself have a very small moment with that. The sight of him sleeping safely in a strange bed, in a strange room, in a house on a lake she had not known existed yesterday. She closed the door very softly. She went downstairs. The long room was different in the morning. The fire had gone down to embers, but someone had banked them. A fresh log was ready on the hearth. Light came in through the big windows in long, honest shafts that picked up all the dust in the air. And at the far end of the room, through an archway, was the kitchen. And at the kitchen island, Claire was standing with a mug of coffee in one hand and a wooden spoon in the other, stirring something in a heavy-bottomed pot. "Morning," Claire said, without turning. She'd heard Lena on the stairs. "Coffee's on. Oatmeal's 5 minutes out. I can do eggs if you want. I can't do much else. Mr. Hale eats like a bird on rations, so I mostly just feed the security boys." "Coffee's fine." "Sit down, honey." Lena sat on a stool at the far end of the island. Claire poured a mug, black, and slid it across. She didn't ask about cream or sugar. She had already set out both in a small pitcher and a dish. "How do you feel?" Claire said. "I don't know." "That's an answer." Claire went back to stirring. She was maybe 65, gray hair in a loose braid, a flannel shirt over a t-shirt, jeans, no jewelry except a thin gold ring on her right hand. The kind of woman you might see at a church potluck or a small-town library. Not what Lena would have pictured in a house like this. "How long have you worked here?" Lena said. "For Mr. Hale? 11 years. In this house? 2. He moves us around, not as much as he used to." "Us? There's 3 of us full-time. Me in the kitchen, Marin you met, Theo, who you'll see before long. He's outside somewhere. He has a cigarette thing going with the porch in the morning he doesn't think anyone notices." She glanced over. "You slept?" "A little." Liar. A very little. Claire almost smiled. "There's a bathroom through that door there if you want a shower. Clean clothes are on the chair in your room. I guessed at your size. I probably guessed wrong. But it's something not soaked in rain. Mr. Hale's gone down to the dock. He said when you came down, if you came down, you should come find him. Or not. He was very particular, I tell you the or not. He's here." "He's here?" Lena took a long swallow of coffee. It was strong and unfamiliar, some kind of bean she'd never had at Dot's. She wrapped both hands around the mug. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Honey, I've been married 37 years. I know what a question from a woman sounds like. You go ahead." "Is he—" Lena stopped. She tried again. "You've known him a long time. Is he safe, you mean?" "I don't—" "That's what you mean. That's what anybody means when they ask a thing like that." Claire set the spoon down on a little ceramic rest. She leaned her hip against the counter. I'll tell you what I know, and then you can decide what you think of it. 11 years ago, Mr. Hale's daughter was killed. I won't tell you how, because it isn't mine to tell. I will tell you she was 16. And I will tell you that the man who did it was a person Mr. Hale had, let's say, a business relationship with. And that Mr. Hale took that personal. Very personal. Lena had gone very still. After that, Claire said, I came into this house. It was a different house then, in a different state. But the job was the same. He needed somebody to keep a fridge stocked and mend a shirt. And I needed the work. My husband, he hurt his back in 14. We were getting by on disability. Mr. Hale has paid my husband's medical bills for 9 years. He has never asked for a single thing in return. Not one. That's a long way from an answer to your question, I know. Claire picked up the spoon again. Here's the answer, best I got. He is a dangerous man. He has done things that would make you not want to sit at this island with him. He has, in the years I have known him, never once lifted a hand or a voice to a woman or to a child. Not one time. He has, in the years I have known him, shown a particular consideration toward people who have been hurt by people bigger than them. And if he told you last night he was not going to make you pay for what he did, honey, he wasn't lying. He doesn't lie about things like that. He lies about other things, but not about that. Lena stared at the top of her coffee. Okay, she said very quietly. Eat your oatmeal when it's ready. Claire turned to the stove. Take it out to him if you want. He didn't eat last night. Bishek. She showered. The clothes on the chair were a soft gray sweater and dark jeans that were a little long, and socks and a pair of canvas sneakers that, astonishingly, fit. She put her hair up wet because she didn't trust her hands with a dryer. She looked at her face in the bathroom mirror and decided not to bother hiding the bruise. There was no hiding it anyway, and there was something she found a little steadying about letting it be seen. She checked on Noah. He was still asleep. Claire had said she'd listen for him, and Lena believed her the way she had not believed most women she had met in the last 2 years. She went down to the dock. The morning was cold. The mist was starting to lift off the water in slow, ragged pieces. The dock was long, weathered gray. And at the end of it, Victor Hale was sitting on a bench with his elbows on his knees and a mug of his own between his hands. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking out at the water, at the place where the mist was thinning into bright. She walked out. Each board thumped softly under her shoes. He heard her. He didn't turn. Morning, Miss Carter? Lena? Lena. She sat down, not right next to him, a foot of bench between them. She could smell his coffee and something faint underneath. Maybe soap, maybe laundry detergent. Up close in the morning light, he looked tired, more tired than he had last night. There were lines around his mouth that hadn't been there in the dark. I brought you oatmeal, she said. He looked at her, at the bowl in her hands. Claire sent you out here with oatmeal. She said you didn't eat. Claire tells on me. Claire tells on you. He took the bowl. He didn't eat it right away. He set it on the bench between them and looked at her for a long moment. You slept? A little? Same answer you gave Claire, I imagine. How do you... I'm guessing. He allowed himself a small flicker of a smile, there and gone. She asks everybody. It's her opening move. Mr. Hale? Victor. Victor. She said it carefully, like it was a word in a language she didn't quite have the tongue for. I have questions. I thought you might. A lot of them. Ask. She looked out at the lake for a second, trying to line the questions up. They had come thick and fast and all at once in the middle of the night, and now, in the morning, on a dock in a place that felt like a photograph someone had set her inside, they had gone a little slippery. What's going to happen to him? She said. Derek. Nothing is going to happen to Derek unless Derek does something to invite it. He is going to go home. He is going to take a week off work. He is going to tell people he fell asleep at the wheel and feel sorry for himself. He is going to drink too much on at least one night, and on that night he is going to think about coming to find you. And then he is going to remember a phone I showed him, and he is going to decide he is very tired, and he is going to go to bed. That is what is going to happen to him. A pause. For the foreseeable future. And the phone is real. Okay. I didn't make up the photograph to scare him, if that's what you're asking. It exists. It's where I said it is. Okay, she breathed. The sheriff is not going to call you. There will be no report. I had the truck towed to a yard in Mansfield, where a man I know will charge Mr. Mallory $800. He does not have to get it back. The Suburban has gone somewhere it cannot be found. My people handled the road by 4 a.m. If anyone out in Ashland County happened to glance out their window last night and see headlights, they saw two cars that didn't hit each other and drove away in different directions. That's not possible. It is possible. It just costs money. She looked down at her hands. They were scraped. She hadn't noticed until now, in daylight, that the heels of both palms were torn up from crawling after her keys in the alley. Why do you have that kind of money? She said. Victor considered her. Then he looked at the water. I'll give you the short version, he said, because the long one would take a day, and you don't have a day. My father ran cargo between Chicago and Toronto for most of the 1970s and 80s. Some of that cargo was legal. When he died, in '99, I inherited the legal parts. When the people who worked with him on the other parts realized I wasn't going to be a pushover, I inherited some of those too. Some of it I've cleaned up, some of it I haven't. I own pieces of 23 companies, Lena. Most of them make or move things that ordinary people use every day and never think about. 2 of them don't. I'm not going to tell you which 2. And last night, the gun, the phone. That's normal for you. It was normal for me 20 years ago. It is not normal for me anymore. Most weeks I sit in rooms in Chicago and talk to accountants and listen to lawyers complain about other lawyers. I have not personally put a gun to a man in 4 years. Last night was a choice I made. Why? I told you last night why. Your daughter. He didn't answer. He looked at the water. What was her name? Lena said. She said it softly. She didn't know if she had a right to ask, but it was out of her mouth before she could decide. Victor was quiet a long time. Elena? He said finally. My wife wanted to name her Elena. My wife was from a town on the Black Sea. She died 6 months after Elena was born. Car accident in Wisconsin. Another driver, drunk, middle of the afternoon. My daughter, my Elena, grew up without her. Mostly, she grew up with nannies because I was not good at being her father. I was good at making money. I was good at scaring men. I was not good at being her father. And when she was 15, I sent her to a boarding school in Connecticut because I thought that was better than what I could give her here. And a boy she met there became a problem. And I did not take the problem seriously fast enough. Do you want what? He stopped. She saw his jaw move. I don't need the rest, she said. No, he said. You don't. They sat. The mist lifted. The far shore came clear, dark pines, a single hawk circling out above the water. You said last night, Lena said carefully, that I could leave, that the keys were by the door. That's still true. And you just let us go. Yes. Where would we go? Victor turned to look at her. I don't know. That's the hard part of what I offered. That's why I said you could stay here for as long as you needed to decide. I don't have a plan for the rest of your life, Miss Carter. I'm not trying to put you and the boy on a map I drew. I'm trying to buy you the quiet to draw your own. She looked down at her hands again. She didn't know what to do with what he was saying. She had spent 2 years learning, very slowly, to stop flinching when men got too close to her in public. She did not know how to sit on a dock with a man who had killed people, probably, and who had in the last 12 hours done more for her than most people she had known for a decade, and how to have a conversation about what to do with the rest of her life. Noah doesn't talk, she said. I know. For almost 2 years. Not a word. Not to me, not to teachers, not to... He went through 6 months of play therapy with a woman in Ashland and nothing. He draws. He nods. He cries. He laughs sometimes, a little. He doesn't make a sound when he does it. I know. How do you... Never mind. Of course you know. I have the name of a woman in Chicago, Victor said. Dr. Annika Vasic. She works mostly with children who've been through what you'd call complex trauma. She has, at the moment, a very full practice. She also owes me a favor that she has asked me several times to please let her repay. I would like to call her this morning, with your permission, and ask her to come here, not today. She would need a few days. She would see Noah in this house. He would not have to be taken anywhere. He would not have to meet her in a waiting room. She would come to him. Lena's eyes filled. She hated it. She wiped at them with the heel of her hand. You don't even know him. No. Then why? Because I knew a girl, Victor said, who also didn't talk for a while when she was small, after her mother died. And I didn't know what to do about it. And I didn't know anyone who knew what to do about it. And I have thought a great many times about what might have been different if I had. Lena could not look at him. She looked at the water. Okay, she said. Yes. Call her. Thank you. You don't have to thank me. I'd like to thank you anyway. She laughed. It came out wet. That's the weirdest sentence anybody's ever said to me. I've been told I have an odd way of phrasing things. You do. I know. They sat for a while longer. She finally ate a spoonful of his oatmeal because he wasn't going to, and it was good. Brown sugar and some kind of nut she couldn't identify. She ate half the bowl. He watched the water. I have to tell you something else, Victor said. His voice had changed, gone careful. Okay, Derek Mallory is a small problem. The problem I described last night, with the photograph and the phone, that problem is solved for as long as Mr. Mallory remembers to be afraid. But you should understand that I am not, in general, a man without larger problems of my own. Bringing you here, bringing Noah here, does not expose you to Derek. Derek is done, but it may in time expose you to someone else. Her stomach turned. Who? I don't know yet. That's what I want to be honest about. I have enemies, Lena. Most of them are the sort who stay in their own cities and settle their grievances with paperwork and lawyers. Some are not. In the last 6 months, there has been let's call it a shift. A younger man in Detroit has been making inquiries about an old disagreement that I thought had been put to bed. It may come to nothing. It may not. My people are watching. But I will not sit here and tell you this house is a fortress and no harm will come to anyone in it because I don't know that. And lying to you about it on the first morning you are in my care is not a way I want to start. So we could be in danger here too. Less than you were last night, very much less, but not none. And I owe it to you to say that out loud. She sat with it. The morning was turning into a bright, cold day. The sun was up now over the pines on the far shore, and the water had gone from pewter to a kind of hammered silver. You could have not told me that, she said. I could have. Why did you? Because the last woman I promised everything would be fine to, I was wrong, and I have not, since then, promised anyone anything I could not deliver. She took a long breath. I'd like to stay, she said, for now, until Dr. Vasic sees him at least. I'm not making any bigger decisions than that right now. I can't. That is the only decision I asked you to make. Okay? Okay. Back at the house, Noah was awake. He was sitting on a stool at the kitchen island in his dinosaur pajamas, his hair flattened on one side, a bowl of the same oatmeal in front of him. Claire was talking to him quietly. Some story about a cat she used to have, a cat that stole dish rags. And Noah was listening with the grave, attentive face of a child who had become a good listener because listening was mostly what he did. He looked up when Lena came in. His face changed. Just a small thing, a relaxing around the eyes. And Lena crossed the kitchen and put a hand on the back of his head and kissed the top of it. Hey, baby. He leaned into her hip. You sleep okay? A nod. You remember where we are? A nod. It's okay that we're here. For now. Okay? Another nod. Slower. He was watching her face, looking for the lie, and she tried very hard to let there be nothing for him to find. Victor had come in behind her. He stopped at a respectful distance, 4 or 5 feet, and didn't approach the kid. Noah looked at him once, warily, and then back at his oatmeal. Noah, Lena said, this is Mr. Hale. This is his house. He's the one who helped us last night. Do you remember? Noah nodded. His name's Victor. Noah looked up again, his small dark eyes fixed on Victor's face for a long, serious moment. Victor did not smile at him. Lena was grateful for that. Most men, meeting Noah, tried to smile too hard, tried to perform friendliness at him. And Noah hated that. She knew he hated it. Victor just met his eyes. He gave the boy a small, almost formal nod. Not a greeting for a child, a greeting for a person. Noah nodded back. It was nothing. It was a nod. It cost nothing. And Lena watched it happen and felt something loosen in her chest, very slightly, a rope she'd had knotted for longer than she'd known. Beth. The day went on in pieces. She did not know how to sit still in that house. She walked the length of the long room, and she looked at the books on the shelves, novels, some in English, some in what she thought was Russian, and some heavy-looking titles about agriculture and shipping and tax law. And she walked out onto the porch, and she looked at the lake, and she came back in, and she sat, and she didn't know what to do. Claire, reading her, eventually put a load of laundry in her arms and said, "Honey, can you fold these? I'm about to burn the pot roast." And that was a kindness. And Lena knew it was a kindness, and she folded towels at the kitchen island while Noah sat next to her with a sketch pad Marin had found somewhere and drew something in heavy dark pencil. Around noon, Theo came in, a short, wide man in his 50s with a shaved head and hands like a ball-peen hammer, and introduced himself and said if there was anything she needed from outside the house, a toothbrush, a new phone, anything, to let him know. He said it like a man who had offered to pick up toothbrushes on a great many long errands and was no longer embarrassed by it. She asked him shyly if he had a toothbrush for a kid. He brought one back within an hour. Blue. Shaped like a fish. Noah looked at it for a long time when she gave it to him. He turned it over in his hands. He looked up at her. Then, and she almost missed it, she had her coffee halfway to her mouth. He walked out of the kitchen and down the hall and into the room he'd slept in, and she heard very faintly the bathroom door close. He was going to brush his teeth. By himself. Without being asked. Lena sat at the island and put her face in both hands for a second and breathed. Claire, who had seen it, said nothing, but she put a second blueberry muffin on the plate Lena had barely touched and pushed it 2 inches closer. The afternoon Victor spent on the phone. She could hear him through the door of the room he used as an office. His voice rose and fell in a calm, low cadence, and once in a while he laughed, a short private sound, and once in a while he said, "No, that's not acceptable. Tell him to call me back." He came out a little before 4 with a glass of water in his hand and a different look around the eyes. "Dr. Vasic is coming Thursday," he told Lena. "She'll fly into the strip outside Muskegon and Marin will pick her up. She asked me to tell you she's glad to come. She asked me to tell you Noah will set the pace. She asked me to tell you she will not, under any circumstances, touch him, or ask him to say anything, or require him to make eye contact. She said you should tell him all of this before she comes. She said specifically that he should know she is a woman who does not need him to speak, and that he can stop any session at any time by holding up his hand." Lena's eyes were stinging again. She blinked hard. "Thank you. I'm going to step outside," Victor said. I need a few minutes." He went out onto the porch. Through the glass of the front door, Lena watched him standing at the railing, his back to the house, his hand braced on the wood. He didn't move for a long time. She realized, slowly, that Victor Hale, the man who had stopped a truck on Route 20 the night before and put a gun to a drug dealer's neck with the calm of someone signing a check, Victor Hale was doing the thing out there that she had been doing in bathrooms for the last 2 years. Holding onto a flat surface and not making a sound. She didn't go to him. She knew better. She didn't go. But she watched him through the door for a long time, and she understood for the first time that she was going to trust this man. That there were a lot of reasons not to, and a lot of things she did not know, and a lot of things about him that she probably did not want to know, and that she was going to trust him anyway. Not because he had saved her. Because, on the porch, a man she had known for less than a day had let her see that he could still be broken open by the idea of a child getting better. She turned away from the window. She crossed the kitchen. Noah was at the island with his sketch pad. She looked over his shoulder at what he had been drawing for the last hour. It was a house, low and long with big windows, a dock, a lake. 2 figures on the dock, small, one tall, one short. Above the roof of the drawn house, in the shaky block letters of a 7-year-old, he had written a single word. Home. She stood behind him and put both hands on his thin shoulders and did not say anything because there was nothing to say. Outside, Victor Hale straightened up on the porch and turned his face back to the house. The afternoon light was going gold on the water. Somewhere in the pines, the hawk from the morning cried out once and was answered, far away, by another. Thursday came in cold and clear, and Dr. Annika Vasic arrived at the house a little before 11 in a rented sedan Marin had driven up from the airstrip. She was a small, round-shouldered woman in her late 50s with iron-gray hair cut blunt at the jaw, a long wool coat, and the kind of quiet that was not shy. It was selective. She stood in the entryway for a full minute, just taking in the house, and then turned to Lena and said, without ceremony, "You must be his aunt. I won't shake your hand because I don't know where you are with strangers touching you. Is a nod acceptable?"
"Yeah," Lena said. "A nod's fine." Annika nodded. "May I meet him?" "He's upstairs. He knows you're coming. I told him everything Victor said. About the hand, about not having to talk. I think he's been waiting for you."
"Good. Let him come down when he wants. I will sit in that armchair by the window and I will read a book. If he looks at me and goes back upstairs, that is fine. If he walks across the room and sits on the couch, that is fine. If he wants to show me a drawing, that is fine. I will not start anything today. Today, I am a woman in your living room who reads books. Yes?" Lena nodded. Her throat was too tight for words. It took Noah 90 minutes to come down. He came in his socks, the dinosaur under his arm, the sketch pad in his other hand. Annika did not look up when she heard him on the stairs. She turned a page of her book. Noah walked to the middle of the room. He stopped. He looked at her. She turned another page. He walked 4 steps closer. She did not look at him. He walked 4 more. He was standing maybe 6 feet from her armchair now. She turned another page. He held out the sketch pad. Annika set her book down, not fast, not slow. She looked at the offered pad. Then she looked at Noah's face, not his eyes. At his ear, Lena noticed, at the side of his face, which was the kind of soft looking that Lena herself had unlearned how to do. "Thank you," Annika said. "May I look?" He nodded. She took the pad. She turned the pages slowly, one by one. There were 40-some drawings in it, houses and dogs, and the inside of a kitchen, and one terrible dark one of a gas station at night that Lena had never been shown before, had never even known about, and she had to put her hand against the wall and look away for a second. Annika didn't linger on that page. She didn't skip it either. She turned it and went on. She looked at every drawing. When she was done, she closed the pad. She held it out. Noah took it. "These are very good," Annika said. "I would like to come back tomorrow, if that is acceptable to you, and ask you about one of them. Only one of them. You may pick which one, or you may pick none. Either way is fine." He nodded once. He turned around. He walked out of the room. They heard him go up the stairs. Annika did not exhale theatrically. She did not look triumphant. She picked her book back up, marked the place she had been, and folded her hands in her lap. "This boy," she said to Lena quietly, "has been waiting for somebody to not ask him anything. He will be all right. Not today, not this month, but he will be all right. You understand what I am saying?" Lena nodded. She couldn't speak. She sat down on the couch because her legs were unreliable. Annika stayed 3 days. She came in the mornings, she left in the evenings. On the second day, Noah sat on the couch while she read her book, and she read him a paragraph out loud about a man in Norway who built a cabin by himself. And she asked him if he had any questions. He shook his head. She nodded. She went on reading to herself. On the third day, he brought the sketchpad over and he pointed at a drawing, not the gas station one, a drawing of a bird on a fence, and Annika asked him if the bird had a name. He shrugged. "Then we will call him Ernest," she said. "That is a good name for a bird on a fence." And Noah smiled, really smiled, a small creasing of his whole face. And Lena, watching from the kitchen, had to turn around and put both hands flat on the counter and breathe through her nose for a while. On the 4th morning, Annika packed her bag. "I will come once a week," she said, "if Mr. Hale does not object. I think we are at the beginning of something. I will not push it faster than it wants to go. He is not going to speak to me in a month. He may not speak to me in 6, but he has decided I am allowed to see what he sees. That is a great deal. That is the whole of it, in fact." "Thank you," Lena said. Annika looked at her for a moment. "You should sleep," she said.
I'm saying this to you and not to him. He sleeps. You do not. This is backwards. I can't. I know, but you should try. The weeks settled into a shape. Lena did not have a word for what the house had become. It wasn't a home exactly. Home was not a thing you built in 10 days inside a stranger's walls. But the strangeness of it wore down in small ways. She learned the sound of Claire's slippers on the kitchen tile first thing in the morning. She learned that Marin drank her coffee outside on the porch in all weather and did not want to be spoken to for the first 15 minutes. She learned that Theo, for all his hammer hands, carried a tiny silver pair of scissors in his jacket pocket because he liked to deadhead the geraniums on the porch rail when he thought no one was looking. She learned about Victor in pieces. He worked, mostly. He spent long hours in the office he used on the ground floor, on the phone, or at his laptop, and he came out for meals when Claire called him, and he ate, most of the time. And when he didn't eat, Claire gave him a look, and he took a second helping to prove a point. He was not, Lena realized, the man she had met on the dock the first morning. That man had been the one underneath. The one she saw most days was a tired businessman in his 50s who drank too much coffee and answered the phone before the second ring and came downstairs in a sweater and readers to ask her, very politely, if she had seen a pair of nail clippers. They talked in the evenings. Not always. Some nights he disappeared into the office and did not come out until she was already upstairs. Some nights he came and sat by the fire with a book, and they talked for an hour. He asked her about Dot's diner, and she told him about Dot and about a trucker named Ralph, who had come in every Tuesday for 6 years and ordered the same thing, and never once varied his tip. $2? A 50-cent piece. And about the night a pregnant woman had gone into labor at booth 3, and Dot had delivered the baby on the floor of the kitchen because the ambulance had taken too long. Lena had not thought about that night in 2 years. She cried a little telling it, not because it was sad, because it had been beautiful and she had forgotten, at some point in the last 2 years, that beautiful things had happened to her. Victor did not reach across the space between their chairs. He listened. He refilled her water glass when it got low. He said God, softly, when she described the baby's first cry. He did not say anything else, most of the time. Once he told her a story about his wife, just one, a small one, about an argument they'd had at a grocery store about avocados. And the story was so ordinary and so exactly the kind of story a widower tells when he is still deciding if he is allowed to miss a person out loud that Lena had known, listening to it, that it had cost him something to say. Noah was coming back. Not all at once. Not in any way that would have looked like much to somebody who didn't know him. But at the end of the second week, he made a sound, an actual sound, a little laugh, when Theo, outside on the porch, had slipped on a patch of ice and caught himself on the railing and said, "Son of a bitch," very loudly. Lena had been in the kitchen, and she had looked at Claire, and Claire had looked back at her, neither of them daring to move, and from the porch they had heard Noah's laugh, small, surprised, a sound that had climbed up out of him before he'd thought about whether he was allowed. Theo, bless him, had understood exactly what had just happened, and had simply said, to the air, "Well, that was worth a busted hip," and gone back to deadheading his geraniums. At the end of the third week, Noah said a word. He had been coloring at the kitchen island. Claire was making soup. He reached for a red crayon and couldn't find it. It had rolled off the island onto the floor. And without looking up, the way a child does when he is so focused on a thing that he forgets to be careful, he said, "Red," just the one word. Small, hoarse, the voice of a kid who had not used his throat in a long time. He kept reaching for the crayon, saw the empty place where it had been, and only then looked up. At Claire, at Lena, at the room. And his face, Lena would remember for the rest of her life. His face went through about 9 different things in 1 second, and settled, finally, on a kind of frightened wonder. Lena did not shout. She did not grab him. She said very calmly, "It rolled under the island, baby. Hang on." She bent down. She got the crayon. She handed it to him. "Thanks," Noah said. Another word. Claire at the stove was crying quietly into her sleeve. Lena could see her shoulders shaking, but Claire did not turn around, and she did not make a sound. And Noah went back to his drawing, and the kitchen held the moment like a glass of water nobody wanted to tip. That night, after he was asleep, Lena sat on the porch in a blanket, and she cried so hard she thought something inside her was going to come loose. Victor came out. He didn't speak. He sat beside her. After a long time, he said, "I called Annika.
She said to tell you this is how it starts. And Lena nodded, her face in her hands, and did not answer. The peace they had for about 6 weeks. It ended on a Thursday afternoon in early December, which was fitting, Lena would think later, because most of the worst days in her life had been Thursdays. She was helping Claire peel potatoes at the island. Noah was at the far end of the kitchen with Theo, who had been teaching him how to tie a bowline knot with a piece of cord, a lesson that had been going on haltingly for about 3 days. Victor was in the office. Maren was out, somewhere on the property, making her rounds. Claire's radio was on low, the country station out of Traverse City. Outside, it had started to snow, the fine, sifting kind that hadn't decided yet whether to stick. The lights went out, all of them, at once. The radio cut. The refrigerator stopped humming. The soft electrical noise you do not know you hear until it's gone, gone. Claire put down her knife. She did not say anything. She looked at Lena, and Lena understood from the look that this was not a weather thing. Theo had stood up. "Noah," Theo said, his voice so level it was almost gentle. "Buddy, I need you to do something for me. I need you to go with your aunt, right now, okay?" Noah nodded. He put down the cord. He walked to Lena and wrapped both arms around her waist without a word. Victor came out of the office with his phone in one hand and a pistol in the other. He did not raise his voice. "Claire, the pantry, now, you know the one." "Yes, sir." "Theo, the front." "Yes, sir." Lena, eyes on me. She looked at him. Her arms had gone around Noah so tight she could feel his heart against her ribs. "Listen carefully. The house has a room, under the kitchen. The pantry floor lifts. Claire is going to show you. You and the boy go down. You will hear things. You will stay down there until either I come for you, or until Maren comes for you, or until it has been completely quiet for 1 hour. No one else. Not Theo. Not Claire. Do you understand?" "Victor." "Do you understand, Lena?" "Yes." "Go." Claire was already moving. She led Lena across the kitchen into the pantry. A deep old walk-in pantry that Lena had been into every day for 6 weeks. And she pulled back a woven rug and lifted a hatch in the floorboards that Lena had not known was there. A wooden ladder went down into dark. "There's a light on the wall. You'll feel it. It's battery. Go on." "Claire, come with us." "I got things to do up here, honey." "Claire." "Lena, go." Claire's hand was firm on her back, not rough. Lena climbed down with Noah clinging to her neck. The ladder was shorter than she expected, maybe 8 rungs. At the bottom there was a small concrete room the size of a walk-in closet. No window, a cot along one wall, a shelf with bottled water and canned food and a first aid kit, and on the wall, a battery-powered lantern. She found the switch. She turned it on. The hatch above them closed. She heard faintly Claire dragging the rug back into place. "Okay," Lena whispered to Noah. "Okay, baby. Hey, it's okay. Look at me." He looked. "You remember the game we used to play? The really quiet game? I'm going to ask you to play it now. Can you do that?" He nodded. His face was bone white in the lantern light. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere, okay?" He nodded again. She sat on the cot. She pulled him into her lap. He was too big. He was always too big now. She held him anyway, his head tucked under her chin, and she listened. For a long time she heard nothing. Then from somewhere above and to the right, 3 soft cracks. Not loud. Muffled by floorboards and earth. A pause. 2 more. Something heavy fell. Somebody shouted and the shout was cut short. Another crack. A silence. A long, strange, moving silence in which she could hear, she was sure of this, footsteps, more than one set, moving fast across a floor she could not see. Then one very loud sound, a bang, that made Noah flinch against her and made the little cinderblock room shiver. Then silence again. A longer one this time. She counted her breaths. She got to 200. She started over. She got to 200 again. Noah's fingers were knotted in her sweater so hard she could feel them through the wool. From above, somewhere, the sound of someone walking across the kitchen floor. Slowly. 1 set of footsteps. Not Claire's slippers. Not Theo's boots. A tread she didn't know. The footsteps stopped over her head. She held her breath. They moved on. She counted to 1,000 this time. At around 400, she realized she was shaking so badly that Noah was shaking with her. And she made herself stop. She made herself breathe. She made herself be still because he needed her to be still. A long time passed. She couldn't guess how long. It might have been 20 minutes. It might have been 2 hours. There were no more footsteps for a long time, and then there was one set, coming slowly, and she heard them stop, and she heard a voice say her name. Victor's voice. "Lena, it's me. I'm alone. I'm going to open the hatch." She nodded pointlessly in the dark. The hatch came up. The pantry light was on again. The power was back, and Victor was kneeling above her in a white shirt that had a long smear of blood across the front of it. His face was cut along the cheekbone and bleeding, and his left arm was held oddly against his side. "It's over," he said. "You can come up. It's over. But I need you to... Lena, I need you to keep him against your side so he doesn't look into the living room. Can you do that?" She nodded. She climbed up the ladder with Noah held against her hip and his face pressed into her neck. At the top, Victor took his weight for a second while she got her feet under her. His arm was definitely wrong. She could see now that something at the shoulder had gone. "Claire," she said. "Theo." "Claire is all right. She has a cut on her scalp that looks worse than it is." "Theo. Theo is not all right, Lena. I'm sorry. Oh, God. Keep him against you." She walked through the kitchen with her hand cupping the back of Noah's head so he couldn't turn. She couldn't help seeing, she saw in her peripheral vision anyway, a man in black tactical gear lying face down beside the refrigerator, not moving, a dark puddle running out from under him toward the baseboards. Another in the hallway. She looked at the floor. She walked. Maren was on the porch. She was on her phone. She was bleeding from somewhere on her forearm. When she saw Lena, she nodded, once, briskly, and went back to her call. Victor led Lena to the far end of the porch, away from the door. He sat her down on the wooden bench there. He sat across from her. The snow had kept coming, lightly, and there was a soft dusting of it on the porch rail, on his dark boots. "Keep holding him," Victor said. "He doesn't need to see any of this for another few hours. Claire's going to come out and sit with you while things get handled. Victor, Theo was my friend for 23 years. She stopped. She stared at him. His face hadn't moved. He was looking at the snow on the railing. The blood on his cheekbone had started to dry in a thin line down toward his jaw. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded. "The man from Detroit," Lena said. "The one you were watching for." "Yes." "Why now?" "Because I was careless 6 weeks ago. Because I moved a woman and a child into my house, and I did not take a phone call I should have taken, and a man who was looking for leverage found some." His voice did not rise. It went quieter, if anything. "I should have seen it coming sooner. I didn't. Theo is dead because I didn't. Victor, this is not your fault. I want to say that first because you are about to try to decide that it is. It is not. But it is the consequence of my choices, and you and the boy are here because of my choices. And that means, Lena, that I have been thinking for the last hour about what I am going to say to you next, and I want you to hear it out before you answer. Can you do that?" She nodded. Claire came out onto the porch. She had a bandage across her forehead and blood in her hair, and her eyes were red. She sat down next to Lena without a word and took Noah's hand gently where it was dangling from Lena's side. Noah let her. Claire squeezed his hand. Claire did not cry. Lena understood that Claire had decided not to cry until later, when it would not frighten the child, and Lena loved her in that moment in a way she had not loved a woman in a long time. Victor took a breath. "I've been building this life for 30 years, he said. "The businesses, the properties, the people, the careful arrangements that keep it running. A week ago, I thought I would spend the rest of my life managing it. Now I don't. Now I think it is time to walk away from all of it. Victor, I have a place, a property. It's small. It is nowhere near here. It is not in this country. It is on a coast. The details don't matter yet. It is registered to a name that does not belong to me on any paper anyone has access to. I bought it 11 years ago, after my daughter. I bought it because I thought I would need it eventually, and I did not know when. I have never stayed there. I have never even seen it with my own eyes. A woman I trust keeps it ready. You're leaving the country. I am leaving this country. Yes, with... He paused. He looked at her for the first time since he'd started talking. With, I hope, your permission, and yours alone. I am offering to take you and Noah with me. The three of us would go, tonight, or tomorrow, before the people who sent the men into this house have time to send more. I have a plane. I have documents. I have a way out that was built for this exact day, though I did not know, when I built it, that it would be for 3 people instead of 1. Victor, I'm not asking you for anything, Lena. I am not... He stopped. He ran a hand over his face. She saw for just a second how exhausted he was, how completely at the end of something he was. I am not asking you to be anything to me. I am not asking you to make me a home. I am asking you to let me walk away from the last 30 years of my life. And I would like, when I do that, to walk toward something. And I would like, if it is at all possible, for that something to be a woman and a child I have come to, for whom I have come to... He stopped. He couldn't finish the sentence. She watched him try and not make it. For whom you have come to care, she said softly. Yes. She looked at the snow on the rail. She looked at Claire, whose hand was still holding Noah's. She looked at Noah, who was watching Victor's face with an intensity she had not seen from him since he was 5 years old, back when his eyes had still held opinions. She turned her face down to his ear. Noah, she whispered, Mr. Hale wants to take us somewhere safe, somewhere a lot farther away, somewhere where it will be quiet for a long time. Do you want to go with him? He was quiet a long time against her neck. Then very softly, in a voice that was only 2 words old and still finding its shape, yes. The third word she had heard out of him in almost 2 years. Lena closed her eyes. She held him tight. She felt the snow on her cheek, cold and already melting, and she thought about Route 20 and the red truck and the rear-view mirror, and about a ruined grilled cheese dissolving in rain on the pavement of an alley in Millbrook, Ohio, and about how many choices, how many small, private, unbelievable choices had stacked up between that moment and this one, to put her on a porch in the snow beside a man who was asking her, in almost the same words, the same thing he had asked her in the dark on the shoulder of a highway. Let me get you somewhere dry. She opened her eyes. She looked at Victor. Okay, she said. Yes. Okay. He nodded once. He didn't smile. He pressed 2 fingers against his mouth for a second, hard, and then he lowered his hand. Thank you, he said. You don't have to thank me. I'd like to thank you anyway. They sat on the porch. The snow kept coming. Behind them, inside the house, men Lena didn't know had begun to arrive. Quiet men, in dark coats, who greeted Marin by her last name and did not look at the porch. And the long, slow work of making Theo's body ready to leave with dignity was being done by people who had loved him. Claire held Noah's hand. Victor sat very still. Lena watched the snow on the railing, and she did not cry, because there was a part of her that had gone someplace beyond crying, and she understood that whatever was ahead of the 3 of them, she was not going to see the lake again. Somewhere in the trees on the far shore, a hawk called, and another answered, far away. They left the lake house before dawn. Lena packed almost nothing. A change of clothes for Noah, the dinosaur, the sketch pad, a photograph of Rachel she'd kept in the bottom of her suitcase since the funeral, a bad photograph, taken at Christmas when Rachel was 18 and laughing about something nobody had written down. She left behind the blue house on Birch Street and the Corolla and the $843 in a savings account at Millbrook Federal, and the name of the diner where she'd served coffee for 4 years, and a waitress apron with a grease stain on the pocket. She left behind the woman she had been. Marin drove them to a small private strip on the Michigan side of the state line. Claire came too, not because she was going with them, but because she had refused point blank to let them leave without hugging the boy goodbye. On the tarmac, in the black air before sunup, Claire took Noah's face in both hands and said, You be good. You eat your breakfast. You use your words when you're ready, not before. And Noah, who a month ago would not have met her eyes, looked straight at her and nodded once, and then quietly said, Bye, Claire. And Claire had to turn her face away toward the hangar lights because her mouth had started doing something she could not control. The plane was small and white and had no markings on it that Lena could read. A pilot who did not give his name nodded at Victor and looked at Lena for about 1 second longer than was polite, and then looked away. They got on. They sat down. Noah, who had never been on a plane, pressed his face against the oval window and watched the runway lights come on. Victor sat across the aisle from them in a dark sweater with his left arm in a sling. A doctor Lena had not met had come to the house the night before and put the shoulder back in and wrapped it, and he'd taken 2 white pills at 4 in the morning, and he had not, as far as she could tell, slept. He looked every one of his 50 years. His cheekbone was stitched. "Ready," the pilot said from the cockpit.
Victor looked at Lena. Lena looked at Noah. Noah was watching the runway like it was a movie. "Ready," she said.
They flew for a long time. Lena lost the count of it somewhere over water. At some point, Noah fell asleep against her shoulder, his mouth open, his breath warm through her sweater. She did not sleep. She watched the dark outside the window slowly turn blue, and then pink at the edge, and then orange, and she felt the plane descend through a bank of cloud and come out the other side over a coastline she did not recognize, low hills, whitewashed houses, a ragged line of dark cliffs dropping into a sea that, in the morning light, was the color of a bruise turning to green. They landed on another small strip. The air coming in when they opened the door was warmer than December had any right to be, and it smelled like salt and pine and some herb she didn't know. A woman was waiting for them beside a dusty hatchback. A woman in her 50s with gray hair cropped short and skin the color and texture of someone who had spent her life outside. Victor introduced her as Inez. Inez did not shake hands. She handed Noah a small paper bag with 2 oranges in it, as if she had been told what a 7-year-old boy might like after a long flight, and she drove them up a coast road in a car that had no air conditioning and had seat covers woven from something that felt like straw. The house sat on a headland above a small stony cove. It was not large. It was white-walled and flat-roofed, and it had a single crooked olive tree in a gravel yard and a view of nothing but water. It was, Lena thought when she first saw it, the opposite of the lake house in every single measurable way. And maybe that was the point. Inside, the floors were stone. The kitchen had a blue tile counter. There were 3 bedrooms, not 4. The furniture was old but not precious. The couch had been slept on by somebody's dog a long time ago. There was no television. "It is not finished," Inez said, in a heavy accent Lena couldn't place and did not ask about. "I stop when the owner is not here. There is bread in the box. There is soup in the pot. There is a phone in the desk. The number is on the wall. You call if you need something. I will come twice a week." "Thank you, Inez," Victor said. "Don't thank me. I am paid." But she smiled at him, a small private smile of old friends, and on her way out she brushed her hand against his good arm. The 3 of them stood in the middle of the main room of the house after she was gone, 3 people holding nothing, and Lena felt the enormity of what they had just done come up behind her like a wave. She sat down on the couch very suddenly. Her knees had gone. "Okay," she said, to nobody. "Okay. Okay." Noah sat down next to her. He took her hand. He did not say anything, because he didn't have to. He had brought his sketch pad, and he set it on his lap and opened it to a clean page, and he began to draw, very carefully, a picture of the olive tree. Victor went and stood at the window, looking out at the water. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The house, around them, made the small settling sounds a strange house makes. In the yard, the olive tree moved its silver leaves in a wind Lena could not yet feel through the walls, and the sea below them did what the sea does, which is pretend to be eternal, even though it is only very old. The first weeks in this house were not what anybody would have called healing. They were exhausting in a duller, quieter way than the lake had been. Noah, freed at last from the particular danger that had put his voice underground, did not suddenly come out of himself. He went further into himself at first, because a child's body has to catch up with its safety before it can do anything else with it. He slept enormous amounts. He ate in long silent bouts. He sat in the olive tree's shade for whole afternoons. Lena, too, fell apart in ways she had not given herself permission to fall apart before. The first night in the new house, after Noah had gone to bed, she walked down the stony path to the cove and sat on a rock in the dark and cried for an hour and a half, for Theo, whom she had known for 6 weeks and who had been kind to her child, for Rachel, who had died in the bathroom of a gas station at 24, for her own mother, who had given up at 41, for the woman she had been at 22 and had thought was going to have a life like other people had lives. She cried until the tide came up around the rock she was sitting on and soaked her feet. When she got back to the house, Victor was on the porch. He didn't ask where she had been. He had a cup of tea waiting on the low wall next to his own. "I didn't know you drank tea," she said. "I don't. Inez left a tin. I thought I'd try it." "Is it any good?" "It's terrible." She laughed. The laugh came up out of her like something that had been stuck. She took the cup. It was in fact terrible. She drank it anyway. "Victor?" "Yes." "Are we safe here?" He considered it, the way he considered everything. He did not answer quickly. "I think so," he said finally. "For the first 6 months, I will be more careful than is reasonable. After that, if nothing comes, I will let myself be less careful. The people who sent the men into the lake house, the group in Detroit, they are looking for me. They are not, to my knowledge, looking for you or for the boy. What they know about me does not include this house, or this name, or this country. What I left behind, the companies, the properties, the accounts, it was enough. It will keep them occupied for years. By the time they are done, if they are ever done, I will not be the person they are still angry at. I will be someone else. Someone else. Someone who lives in a white house on a cliff, who walks down for bread in the morning, who argues with a woman named Inez about whether the oranges are ripe. That's not who you are. No, it's who I intend to become. And if they find you, they will not find me. But if they do, there are arrangements. You and the boy would not be with me when it happened. You would be elsewhere, with papers and money, a long way from whatever my ending looked like. I have made sure of that. I would like to not discuss the details tonight. Is that acceptable?" "Yes." They sat with the sea. "I'm not a wife, Victor." "No. I'm not. I don't know what I am. To you. I don't know. No. Lena. Let me. Lena, please. I'm not asking you to be anything to me. I told you that in Michigan, and it is still true. I'm asking you to raise a child with me in this house, because I have come to love the child, and because I... He stopped. He looked out at the water for a long moment. "I would be lying," he said, "if I told you my feelings for you were only maternal on his behalf. I would also be lying if I told you I had any idea what to do about those feelings, at my age, in this life, with the body and the history I have got. So I am not going to do anything about them. I'm going to let us live here, and I am going to be useful. And if 10 years from now you decide you would like to kiss me, I will be astonished and grateful. And if you never decide that, I will still be grateful. Do you understand what I am telling you?" "Yes." "Good." She sat with her cup and listened to the waves below the house, and she thought that in all her life no man had ever spoken to her that way. Plain, without strategy, without any of the 1,000 small coercions she had learned to detect. And she thought, I don't know if I love him. I might. I might come to. I have the rest of a life to find out. She did not say any of that. She put her hand on his, just for a second, on the low wall. He did not move his hand. He did not turn his hand over to take hers. He let her hand sit on his, and then she took it back, and they sat in the dark the rest of the way through their terrible tea. In the spring, Noah started school. It was a small school in the nearest town, run by a woman who wore sandals in every weather and taught about 15 children in a room that had once been a stable. Lena had been terrified. She had stood in the doorway on the first morning and watched Noah walk across the courtyard with his new backpack bouncing against his back, and she had thought, he won't speak. They'll think there's something wrong with him. They'll be cruel. But Noah had come home that afternoon with his hand clamped around the hand of another boy, a skinny, dark-haired kid named Marco, and Marco had come inside without being invited and sat down at the kitchen table and eaten half the cookies Inez had made, and the two boys had spent the next 3 hours building something in the yard out of rocks that was either a fort or a shrine. It was hard to tell. As that night Noah said at dinner with his mouth full of bread, Marco's sister has a goat. A whole sentence. A whole ordinary, forgettable 7-year-old sentence about the facts of the day. Lena put down her fork. She didn't say anything. She nodded, and she asked him what the goat's name was, and he told her, and they went on eating. She wept that night in the bathroom with the door closed and both hands over her mouth. Victor, who had been on the porch, pretended not to hear her. Later, when she came back out with her face red and her hands not quite steady, He had poured her a small glass of wine and put it on the low wall next to his own, and he had said without looking up, "Marco seems like a good kid." And she had said, "Yes, he is," and that was all that was said about it, and it was enough. Noah grew. That was the word for it in the end. He grew. Not all at once, not neatly. He had bad nights, even 2 years in, nights where he woke up screaming for his mother, nights where Lena sat on his bedroom floor with her back against the wall and her hand on his foot until he fell back asleep. He had bad days. He had one terrible week in the fall of his second year when he decided, for reasons he never explained, that he hated Victor. He would not look at him, would not eat with him, would leave any room Victor entered. Victor did not press. Victor did not try to win him back. Victor simply continued to be where he usually was, at the table, on the porch, walking down to the boats in the morning, and at the end of the week, Noah climbed into Victor's lap at breakfast and said, "I'm sorry." And Victor had put one hand very lightly on the back of the boy's head and said, "There's nothing to be sorry for. You are allowed to not like me for a week." And Noah had stayed in his lap for a long time. Lena watched that happen from the kitchen doorway, and she understood watching it that she had chosen the right man to walk away from a highway with. But she built a life, too. That was harder than Noah's version of it, because she was 29 and had not been a child for a long time, and her hurts had more layers. For the first year, mostly, she read. She had been a reader before Derek. She had stopped, somewhere in those years, because reading required a quiet mind, and she had not had one. In the White House with the olive tree, she read again. Inez brought her books from town, in English and in translation, and Lena worked her way through them. Novels, memoirs, a history of the coast they lived on, a battered paperback about the women who had worked in the canneries in the 30s. She got her hands calloused from digging in the small garden behind the house. She learned enough of the local language to ask for bread and apologize for her accent and understand when the woman at the post office was telling her a story about her son. In the second year, she started to write. It was not a decision she made in any formal way. It began as letters. Letters to Rachel, mostly. Letters she knew her sister would never read. And then, slowly, it became something else. Accounts of the nights in the apartment before Rachel's death. Accounts of Derek. Accounts of the sheriff's office in Millbrook. Accounts of what a small-town court system does and does not do for a woman with a split lip and no money. She wrote them in longhand in a notebook at the kitchen table after Noah was in bed, and she did not show them to anyone for a very long time. In the third year, she showed them to Victor. He read them in one night, sitting in his chair by the window, and when he was done, he closed the notebook and put both hands flat on the cover and looked at her for a long moment. "This is a book," he said. "It's not a book." "It is a book, Lena, or it is most of one, and you know it is, because you have been writing it like a person who knows what she is doing. It's not anything. It's just, listen to me." He leaned forward. His voice was low. "I have sat in rooms with men who have written books, men I have paid a great deal of money to help me understand things. What you have written in this notebook is better than most of what I have read. It is better because you are not trying to sound like anything. You are just telling it. You need to send it to someone." "Send it to who?" "I know a woman." "Of course you do." "Don't start with me, Lena." "I'm not starting. I'm tired." "Okay, I'll think about it." She thought about it for 6 months. Then she sent it. The woman Victor knew was a literary agent in London, a thin acerbic Scot named Iona Reid, who read the whole thing in 48 hours and called from a landline and said, in a voice dry as paper, "Mrs. Carter, I do not use the word important often, and I would like to use it about you if that's all right." Lena sat at the kitchen table with the phone in her hand and did not know what to say. The agent did not make her say anything. The agent said, "Take 6 weeks, write me a proposal. We will go from there." The book came out 18 months later. It was not by any measure a bestseller. It was a small, slim, quiet book that won a prize nobody in the house had ever heard of, and got reviewed in 2 newspapers and was, for a period of about 4 months, discussed in certain rooms that did not include Lena's. She did not go back to the United States to promote it. The publisher, understanding certain things that had been explained to them by Iona Reid, did not insist. She did one interview, by phone, with a reporter in Toronto, and she cried once during it, quietly, when the reporter asked her about her sister. What the book did, And this was what mattered, what Lena had not expected, what made her, in the end, write a second one, was it reached other women. They wrote to her. They wrote to her in the care of her publisher, and the publisher forwarded the letters to a P.O. box in a town Lena could get to by ferry. And every few weeks, Lena would sit at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes, and she would read them, one by one, and she would answer, by hand, the ones that seemed to most need an answer. Women in apartments in Phoenix, women in trailers in West Virginia, women in rented rooms in Alberta, women whose names she did not know and would never know, writing to her because she had written, in a small book, about the particular shape of the thing they were inside, and because nobody had ever in their lives written about it in a way that did not make them feel like the shape was their fault. She started a fund with the money from the book. It was small at first. She called it the Rachel Carter Fund after her sister, and it paid for two things: first month, last month rent for women leaving men, and replacement Social Security documents for women whose documents had been taken from them. Victor, when she told him she was doing it, nodded and said nothing. And a week later, she opened the fund's account and saw that a very large amount of money had been put into it by a donor whose name she did not recognize. She did not ask him about it. He did not bring it up. The fund grew. It was, in the 5th year of the house on the cliff, helping maybe 40 women a year. In the 10th year, 300. In the 12th year, after another book and after an essay Lena wrote for a magazine that somehow went around the world in a weekend, the fund had a small office in Ohio, in Columbus, an hour from where Lena had once lived in a bad apartment with a man named Michael, and 3 employees and a board of directors, and a name that people recognized sometimes when they heard it at dinner parties. Lena did not go to Ohio, not even once. A version of her had died on Route 20 when she was 29, and she did not feel the need to visit the grave. But Victor changed too, slower. He was older. The things in him that had been made hard by 30 years of a particular kind of work did not soften quickly, and some of them did not soften at all. He had bad dreams for the first 2 years, loud ones, and Lena would hear him in the night, making low animal sounds on the other side of a bedroom wall, and she would lie in the dark and not go to him because she understood she was not yet the kind of person to him who could go to him. He went running every morning, down to the cove and along the beach and back up, and when he came back he was red-faced and bad-tempered for an hour, and then he was Victor again. He did things with his hands. He had never done things with his hands. He took a class in the town, on carpentry, with an old man named Henrique, who did not seem to understand who Victor was, or maybe did and did not care. Victor made, in the first year, a very bad stool. He made, in the second year, a slightly better stool. By the 4th year, he was making tables. By the 7th year, he was making, in a workshop he had built himself out behind the house, cabinets that were beautiful, actually beautiful, in a way that surprised everybody, including himself. He stopped being a man who carried a phone. The phone, the one he'd had in Michigan, the one that had rung at all hours, had been destroyed the night they had left. The phone he had now was a cheap handset without the internet, and it almost never rang. Inez had the number. Iona Reed had the number. The school had the number. That was all. Once, in the 6th year, somebody came looking for him. A man. An American. He drove into town in a rented car and asked questions in 2 bars, using a name that had not been Victor's name for a long time. Inez heard about it before lunch. She came up to the house and told Victor, calmly, what was being asked, and where, and by whom. Victor sat at the kitchen table for a long moment. Then he made 2 phone calls, in a language Lena did not speak, and by evening the American was gone, and a week later Victor told Lena, without drama, that the man had been a private investigator hired by someone who was no longer interested in the answer. That was all he said. Lena did not ask how he knew. Victor did not offer. It did not happen again. In the 9th year, Lena kissed him. She had known, by then, for a long time that she was going to. She had simply been waiting until she was sure she was not kissing him out of gratitude, because she had never wanted to do a thing as important as that out of a debt. She kissed him on the porch on a summer evening when Noah had gone to Marco's house for the night, and the sea was very still. He was sitting in his chair. She walked over and she bent down and she put her mouth against his. And he was so surprised that for a full second he didn't move. Then he did. Then he put his hand on the back of her neck, his good hand, and he kissed her back, carefully, the way he did everything, as if she were a decision he did not want to make sloppily. When she pulled back, his eyes were wet. "I thought you might," he said. "I know. I was going to wait as long as I had to. I know. Lena, I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. I'm 59. I know how old you are, Victor. My body doesn't stop," she said, gently. "We have time. We have all the time anybody ever had. We'll figure it out." And more or less, they did. Noah was 17 the year Victor got sick the first time. It was pancreatic, and it was caught early, and the doctors were good, and he got better. He was 64. It scared all three of them badly. Noah, who had not said a thing about feelings in about 3 years the way teenagers don't, sat with Victor the night he came home from the hospital and held his hand for an hour and did not say anything and finally said, "Don't do that again." Victor said, "I'll try not to." Noah said, "Try harder." Victor laughed, and then Victor cried, and Noah, at 17, 6 feet tall now with his mother's dark eyes and his uncle's stubborn jaw, put his arm around the shoulders of the man who had become his father and said, "It's okay. You're okay." Shh. Noah went to university on the mainland. He studied, of all things, marine biology, and then later, architecture, and then later still, the two of them fused, and he ended up designing coastal houses that were meant to survive the sea rising. He lived away from the White House for years at a time and came back for long stretches and brought a girlfriend one year and then a different girlfriend, and then, in his late 20s, a man named Tomas. And it was Tomas who lasted. Tomas was a gentle, sarcastic person who cooked enormous lunches and adored Lena and called Victor Papai from the first week in a way that Victor never quite got used to and never asked him to stop. Noah was 31 the day Victor died. It was the pancreatic thing, the second time. It had come back slower and harder, and it had taken Victor most of a year to die of it, and the dying had been, on the whole, the way dying is. Not good, not a story, not a lesson. He was in the house. Lena slept in the chair by his bed the last month. Noah was there. Tomas was there. Ines, old now, moving slowly, came and went. On the afternoon he died, the window was open, and the sea was doing the thing it did, and Victor, who had been mostly asleep for 2 days, opened his eyes and looked at Lena and said, very clearly, "Thank you for letting me." "For letting you what?" she said. "For letting me—" He didn't finish. He smiled, a small, tired smile, and closed his eyes. And a little later, he stopped breathing, and the room got very quiet, and the sound of the sea came in through the open window, and Lena sat with her forehead against his forehead for a long time. She buried him in the small cemetery above the town, under an olive tree that was not the one in their yard, but could have been its cousin. The stone was small. It said his name, the one he had used for the last 22 years, which was not the name he had been born with, and the dates, and nothing else. He had asked for nothing else. He had said, when he was still able to say such things, "Lena, I lived enough words. Don't put any on me." She wrote one more book after. Not about him. She did not in the end ever write about him in any book anybody read. She felt, about Victor, that his story belonged to him, and that he had chosen, at the end, to be a man buried under a single name and a pair of dates, and that she would not undo that choice for the sake of a good chapter. The book she wrote was about the women of the fund, about 3 of them in particular, 3 women who had written to her in the first years and with whom she had kept a correspondence, quietly, for a decade and a half. The book was about their lives now, not the night they had left, not what had been done to them, what they had made after with what they had left. One of them was a nurse in Oregon. One of them ran a small daycare in Tennessee. One of them had died, in her 40s, of a cancer nobody had caught in time, and Lena wrote about her too, because it was important. Lena had decided a long time ago not to only tell the stories that ended the way we wanted them to. That book was the one that sold. More than the first one. It was on a list for a while. A woman on the radio in the United States interviewed Lena about it, and Lena did the interview over a crackling line from the kitchen of the White House. And at one point the woman asked her, "What would you want people to take away from this book, if they could only take one thing?" And Lena sat in the kitchen for a long time before she answered. I would want them to know, she finally said, that nobody gets out on their own. Every woman I wrote about, every one of us, somebody stopped. Somebody saw us on the side of some road and decided not to drive past. It wasn't always a person with a plane and a passport. It was a neighbor or a teacher or a woman at a Walmart checkout who saw a bruise and paid for the diapers. It was a stranger in an alley who called an ambulance instead of a cop. It was small. It was almost always small. She paused. Her throat had tightened. I would want them to know, if there's anybody listening to this in a car somewhere trying to decide whether to stop, please stop. Please just stop. You don't know. You can't know. You think you don't have enough to give. You do. You have enough to give. Whatever it is, it's enough. It was enough for me. It was enough for my kid. Just please stop. The radio lady was quiet for a second. Thank you, Mrs. Carter, she said, in a voice that was not quite professional anymore. Thank you, Lena said. Thank you for having me on. She hung up. She went out onto the porch. It was evening. Noah was coming up the path from the cove with Tomas and with the little girl Tomas's sister had left in their care for the week. A small brown-eyed child, 4 years old, who called Lena Avo, without having been told to, and whose laugh sometimes did a thing to Lena's chest that she did not have a name for. Lena sat down on the low wall where she had once sat with Victor and drunk a terrible cup of tea. She looked out at the sea. She thought, not for the first time, about the alley behind Dot's diner, about the grilled cheese dissolving in the rain, about a woman with a split lip sitting behind the wheel of a dying Corolla, counting the money in her apron and thinking the electric bill was her biggest problem. She thought about how close she had come. How many moments in the hours after that she could have done something slightly different, and none of the rest would have happened. If she had gone into the sheriff's office instead of sitting in the parking lot, if she had not run Route 20 that afternoon, if Victor had been 10 minutes later out of Chicago, she did not believe anymore in a plan. She had buried too many people, loved and known, to believe in a plan. She believed in choices. She believed in the fact that on a Tuesday night in November, a tired businessman had looked up from a surveillance report in an office above Lake Michigan and had decided, not because he had to, not because any law required it, but because he could, to get in a car and drive east into a rainstorm he did not have to drive into. That was the thing. That was always the thing. He had stopped. In the dark. For a woman he did not know and a child he had never met. Because he could. And everything after, everything, had been built on the back of that one small, unnecessary choice. Noah reached the porch. The little girl broke free of Tomas's hand and ran toward Lena with her arms out, and Lena caught her and lifted her and settled her on her hip the way she had once, a long time ago, lifted a silent boy in dinosaur pajamas out of the back seat of a car on the shoulder of a highway. The little girl put her sticky hand on Lena's cheek and said something in the mix of languages she had decided, at 4, was the correct way to address her grandmother. Lena kissed the top of her head. "Dinner?" Noah said, climbing the last of the steps. His hair was going gray at the temples, the way Victor's had. He was a kind, broad-shouldered man now, a man who listened more than he spoke. Some version, Lena thought sometimes, of the two men who had raised him, stitched together. "Dinner," Lena said. They went inside. The house smelled like the thing Tomas had started in the oven an hour ago. The kitchen was warm. The olive tree in the yard moved its silver leaves. And somewhere, in a town Lena had not thought of in years, the lights were coming on in a diner at the start of an evening shift, and some young woman in an apron was carrying 3 plates to a booth, and maybe, one day, a man she had not yet met would stop in a rainstorm on a road she had not yet been forced to take, because he could. And that woman, too, would get to the other side of what was coming. Lena set the little girl down on a chair. She went to help her son and his husband put dinner on the table. Outside, the sea did what the sea does. And the evening, like all of the evenings in that house, went on.